What would you do if the person who destroyed your life walked back into it? And this time, you had everything to lose? For 10 years, Olivia Bennett chose to become invisible. No name, no face, no future, just survival. But when a billionaire bought the company she'd been hiding in, he did the one thing nobody had done in a decade. He looked at her. And that single moment cracked open a life she'd spent years burying. This is her story. If this is your kind of story, hit like, drop your city in the comments, and let's see how far this reaches. Now let's begin. The elevator in the Hargrove Financial Building smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner, same as always. Olivia Bennett stepped inside at 7:43. Every morning, stood in the back left corner, never the center, never near the buttons, and stared at the scuff marks on the floor until the doors opened on the 14th floor. She had memorized every scratch on that linoleum. She knew which fluorescent bulb above accounting flickered every third Tuesday. She knew that the break room microwave beeped twice before it started and 3 times when it finished, and that if you wanted hot water from the coffee machine, you had to press the button and wait a full 4 seconds before it actually came out. She knew these things because she paid attention to everything that didn't require another human being to notice her back. That was the arrangement she had made with herself, somewhere around year 3 of this job. Keep your head down, do your work, go home. Don't give anyone a reason to look at you twice. For almost a decade, it had worked perfectly. The 14th floor of Hargrove Financial was a particular kind of purgatory, not loud enough to feel alive, not quiet enough to feel peaceful. 46 employees sat in a grid of gray cubicles, processing reports, running projections, sending emails that nobody read carefully. The fluorescent lights buzzed from 8 in the morning until whatever time the last person decided to leave, and the carpet was a shade of taupe that suggested someone, at some point, had tried to make the color inoffensive and accidentally made it depressing. Olivia's cubicle was in the far corner beside the supply closet. She had requested it herself when she started, 8 years ago. Her desk held exactly 3 personal items. A small succulent in a white pot, practical, low maintenance, required minimal attention from her. A photograph, face down, that she never turned over but could never bring herself to throw away. And a chipped University of Illinois mug that said Fighting Illini in faded orange letters, which she'd picked up at a Goodwill for $1.49 and used to hold her pens. Everything else was work. Spreadsheets, projections, market analysis reports that ran 40, 60, sometimes 90 pages long, color-coded and cross-referenced with a precision that would have made an actuary cry with joy. She was good at this job. Not just competent, not just reliable, genuinely good. The kind of good that made her supervisors look smart when they submitted her work under their names, which they did, regularly, because Olivia never complained and never asked for credit. That was also part of the arrangement. Her name was technically Olivia Bennett, but most people on 14 called her the quiet one from the corner when they needed to reference her, which wasn't often. Her direct supervisor, a round-faced man named Greg Paulson, who wore the same navy suit every Monday and smelled permanently of spearmint gum, referred to her as my analyst in meetings he took credit for attending. He had mispronounced her last name as Barnett for the first 6 months. She hadn't corrected him. Her wardrobe was a study in camouflage. Oversized cardigans in beige, brown, and gray, slacks that were one size too big, sensible shoes that made no sound on the carpet. Her hair, a warm chestnut brown that would have been striking if she'd let it be, was kept in a bun so tight it looked like a deliberate act of punishment. The glasses she wore were thick-framed, practical, slightly too large for her face. She was 30 years old and looked both younger and more exhausted than that. "You should update your look," her coworker Janet had once offered, with the particular brand of unsolicited kindness that's really just judgment in better packaging. "You'd be pretty if you just—" "I'm comfortable," Olivia had said. Not rude, not warm, just a door quietly closed. Janet had not brought it up again. The morning everything changed began the same way every morning began. Coffee, spreadsheet, pretend to be furniture. The company-wide email had come out 3 days earlier. Hargrove Financial has been acquired by Cole Capital, effective immediately. We look forward to welcoming our new ownership and leadership team. But the 14th floor had treated it with the same energy they treated most corporate communications. Mild irritation followed by complete indifference. "He's 32, Janet said from the cubicle next to Olivia's, not looking up from her screen. She'd been on her phone most of the morning, cycling through articles about Nathan Cole with the focused intensity of someone doing actual research. Self-made. Like genuinely self-made. No family money. Started his first company at 23. Said Derek from accounting, who sat across the aisle and was currently eating a breakfast burrito, despite it being 11 in the morning. He's got a kid, Janet continued. His wife died a few years ago. Little girl, like 5 or 6, I think. He's also, and I'm just noting this factually, extremely good looking. Janet, Derek said. I'm just saying. Olivia said nothing. She was 63 pages into a quarterly risk analysis that was going to require her to rework the third sector projections, because whoever had entered the municipal bond data in August had made a decimal error that no one had caught, including Greg, including the senior analysts, including the compliance team. She had caught it at 8:15 this morning. She would fix it, and no one would know she'd fixed it, and Greg would submit the corrected report and feel good about himself. The arrangement, well, Nathan Cole arrived on a Wednesday. Olivia knew he'd arrived because the energy on the 14th floor changed the way a room's energy changes when a storm is coming. Something electric and nervous moved through the cubicle grid. People sat up straighter. Someone in marketing apparently changed their shirt in the bathroom. And Greg Paulson appeared from wherever Greg Paulson went during the hours he wasn't at his desk, and stood near the elevator in a posture that suggested he'd been practicing it. Olivia did not look up from her decimal error. She heard voices. Several, then a quieter one that had a quality of stillness to it, like someone who didn't need volume to command attention. She heard Greg laughing too loudly at something. She heard Janet whisper, "Oh wow," to herself, which was the kind of thing Janet said when something genuinely surprised her. She fixed the decimal. She moved on to page 64. The voices got closer. "Restructuring decisions until we've actually met everyone, not just leadership," the quieter voice was saying. It had a low, even quality, the kind of voice that didn't rush itself. "I want floor-by-floor briefings. Actual employees, not just the managers." Greg laughed again, slightly less confidently this time. Of course, though I'm not sure there's much to see down here. Most of the heavy lifting happens on 18. Then we'll do 18 after we do 14. Footsteps. Closer now." Olivia turned a page. She was aware, on some background level, that people were looking up from their screens and straightening their spines as the group moved through the floor. Greg leading, flanked by 2 men in suits who had the specific posture of people whose job it was to stand near important people. And behind them, the quiet voice. She kept her eyes on the report. Page 65. Municipal Bond Subcategory C. Revised projection following decimal correction. Excuse me. She looked up. Nathan Cole was not what she'd expected, which was strange because she hadn't expected anything. She hadn't let herself. I was tall, which the internet had not mentioned, with dark hair that had the look of someone who ran a hand through it regularly and didn't much care after that. His suit was good, clearly expensive, the kind of fit that required actual tailoring rather than off-the-rack luck. But he wore it like he'd forgotten he had it on. There was a slight looseness to his tie. His shoes were immaculate, but the left one had a tiny scuff near the toe that no one had caught. She noticed the scuff. She noticed everything, always. He was looking directly at her, which was uncomfortable, and he had the kind of eyes that didn't glance, that they landed, stayed, like he'd decided to pay attention to her specifically and wasn't in a rush about it. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. It didn't sound like a corporate apology. It sounded like he actually meant it. "Nathan Cole." He held out his hand. Olivia looked at it for a beat too long, then shook it. "Olivia Bennett," she said. "Financial analysis." "What are you working on?" The question surprised her. Not "who's your supervisor?" or "how long have you been here?" Those were the questions people in his position asked, because they were safe and easy and didn't require actual listening. "Quarterly risk assessment for the third sector portfolio," she said carefully. There was a decimal entry error in the August municipal bond data that propagated through about 40 pages of projections. I'm correcting it. Something shifted in his expression. Not dramatically, just a small recalibration, like a compass needle finding north. "How long has the error been in there?" "Since August." He paused. "How many quarterly reports has it affected?" 2. This would be the third. "And no one caught it?" She held his gaze. "I caught it this morning," she said. A silence. Behind Nathan, she could see Greg Paulson's expression doing something complicated and unpleasant. Nathan Cole looked at the stack of reports on her desk, then at her screen, then back at her. How long will the correction take you? I'll have a clean version by end of day. Send it directly to my office, he said. Not through, he paused. Just directly. He said it without drama, without any visible intention to embarrass Greg, who was standing 4 feet away. But the message was clear, and everyone in earshot caught it. Okay, Olivia said. He nodded, started to turn, then stopped. You've been here how long? 8 years. Another pause, longer this time. I'll want to schedule time to talk through your work, he said. Properly. Not a walkthrough. I mean, a real conversation. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said, Sure. He left. She turned back to page 65. Her hands were very steady. She was proud of that. She was the last person in the office that night. The floor had emptied out around 6:30. Even Greg, who'd hovered near her cubicle for an uncomfortable 20 minutes making noises about team credit and collaborative processes before giving up and getting his coat. The overhead fluorescents hummed in the emptiness. The cleaning crew came through at 7, nodded at her. She knew their names, both of them, which they'd seemed surprised by the first time, and moved on. She finished the corrected report at 8:14. She stared at the email compose window for a while. 2N Cole. Subject, corrected, Q3 risk assessment. She typed it, deleted it, typed it again. Stop being ridiculous, she told herself. She hit send. She put on her coat, a dark green parka from a thrift store, slightly too large, perfectly warm, and took the elevator down alone. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago did in late October. The wind came off the lake like a personal attack, and the streets had that particular grayness that came before the first real cold. She walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop with her hands in her pockets and her eyes on the sidewalk. Somewhere, in the building she'd just left, there were probably a dozen people her age at dinners and bars, and the kinds of places where people her age did things. She knew this the way you know something you've stopped trying to feel anything about. She caught the 147 North, sat by the window, watched the city move past. What? Her apartment was a 1-bedroom in Edgewater, 3rd floor, radiator heat that worked about 70% of the time, view of the alley. She paid $940 a month, which was below market rate because the landlord, a 73-year-old man named Victor, who lived on the 1st floor, liked that she was quiet and always paid on the 1st. She'd been there 5 years. The apartment was clean in the way that spaces get when someone spends very little time actually living in them. Functional furniture, no art on the walls, a bookshelf so overloaded it had started to bow slightly in the middle. Her kitchen had exactly the ingredients for the 12 meals she rotated through on a 2-week schedule, because she'd discovered, at some point in her mid-20s, that having to think about what to eat was energy she couldn't afford. She made pasta. She ate it standing at the counter because the table was covered in the side project she'd been working on for 3 months. Her own independent market analysis, a 60-page theoretical restructuring proposal for exactly the kind of mid-cap financial services company she worked for, cross-referenced and color-coded, that no one had asked for and no one would ever see. She did it because her brain needed somewhere to go. She sat on the couch with the pasta and the television on low, a nature documentary she wasn't watching, and thought about Nathan Cole's eyes landing on hers and not moving. She thought about how that had felt. Dangerous, she thought. That's what that felt like. She knew exactly what happened when someone looked at you and saw something they wanted to keep. She turned off the television and went to bed. The thing about disappearing was that it required constant, exhausting maintenance. Olivia had gotten good at it over the years, the same way you got good at anything you practiced daily, but it wasn't a natural state. It required active work, the downcast eyes, the unremarkable clothes. The voice kept deliberately flat and quiet, the habit of eating lunch at her desk instead of the break room, of taking the stairs when she knew the elevator would be full, of answering questions with exactly as many words as needed and not one more. It wasn't that she was shy. She had been, once, the opposite of shy. She was 20 years old when she met Daniel Ashford, which was the kind of age at which you can be forgiven for believing that love is straightforward and that rich, charming men are exactly what they appear to be. The Ashfords were Chicago money, not new money, with the flashy awkwardness of people still getting used to it, but old money, the kind that had been comfortable long enough to become quiet about it. Daniel was 26, well-dressed, funny in the way that men who've been told they're funny all their lives are funny, and he had paid attention to a college junior from a regular family in a way that felt, at the time, like being chosen. She'd been stupid enough to feel chosen. They dated for a year and a half. Got engaged at a dinner she'd thought was just a dinner. The ring was a family ring. 3 stones, old setting, clearly significant. And the look on Daniel's face when he put it on her finger looked real to her. She'd been stupid enough to think it was real. She never found out exactly what she did to deserve it. That was the part that had kept her awake more nights than she could count. The not knowing. She'd turned it over and over for years, examining it from every angle, trying to locate the specific thing that had made her a target rather than a person. What she knew was this. At 22, engaged and finishing her business degree and starting her first real job at a downtown financial firm, someone had leaked photographs. The photographs showed a woman who appeared to be Olivia in compromising situations with men she had never met. The quality was convincing, good enough to make people pause before deciding it wasn't real, which was all it needed to be. Within 72 hours, the images were on the boards that powerful men used to destroy women they found inconvenient. Within a week, they'd reached the Ashford family. Within 10 days, Daniel had returned the ring without a conversation, by courier, in a box, with a note from his family's lawyer. Within a month, her employer had let her go. Performance concerns, they'd said, and no one had made eye contact. Her mother had called and said, in the careful voice of someone trying very hard not to say what they were thinking, "Olivia, I just hope you understand what this looks like." And Olivia had understood, right then, that the people who were supposed to know her, who had known her entire life, had looked at those photographs and chosen to wonder. She was 22 years old. She left the apartment she'd shared with a roommate, moved into a studio in a neighborhood where no one knew her name, and spent 6 months barely leaving except for groceries. Then she applied for a data entry position at a company called Hargrove Financial, where nobody knew her face or her name or her story. She wore bigger clothes. She got glasses. She kept her eyes down. And she discovered that the world was, in fact, perfectly willing to ignore you if you asked it to. 8 years later. Nathan Cole's assistant, a crisp, efficient woman named Paula, who spoke in complete sentences and clearly ran more of the operation than her title suggested, called Olivia's desk at 9:15 Thursday morning. "Mr. Cole would like to schedule a meeting with you," Paula said. "This afternoon at 3, if that works." "Sure," Olivia said. "It'll be in his office on 18. Do you know how to get to 18? "I'll find it." She spent the rest of the morning not thinking about it, which meant she thought about almost nothing else. She fixed 2 more projection errors she'd found in a subreport from Q2, added 17 footnotes to a compliance document Greg had submitted half-finished, and reorganized 3 months of bond data into a cleaner format that would have taken the junior analyst 3 days to do. At 2:40, she went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror for a longer time than she usually allowed herself to, and then looked away. She went up to 18. The 18th floor was a different building. Not literally. Same carpet, same fluorescence, but the energy was different in the particular way that executive floors were different, which was to say that the anxiety up here was better dressed. The assistant desks were staffed by people who moved with purpose. The glass-walled offices held people who held phones like they needed them. Paula met her near the elevator and walked her to the corner office, knocked twice, and opened the door. Nathan Cole was on the phone, standing by the window. Chicago stretching behind him in the gray October afternoon. The lake visible as a strip of darker gray at the far edge of the skyline. He turned when she came in and held up one finger. 1 minute. She sat in the chair across from the desk, put her hands on her knees, and looked at the books on the shelf to the left. Actual books, not display books. Spines cracked. Some of them turned sideways where they'd been stacked horizontally. A coffee mug leaving a ring on the corner of the desk. A child's drawing, framed, of what appeared to be a cat with 6 legs, next to a small handwritten caption that said, "Emma age 5, Daddy's best cat." She was almost smiling at the 6-legged cat when he got off the phone. "Sorry," he said, sitting down. "Emma's babysitter canceled and I was trying to—" "It's fine, I sorted it." He picked up a pen, set it down again. "Thank you for sending the report last night." "Sure." "I read the whole thing." She hadn't expected that. "The whole 93 pages? 94, once you count your methodology appendix." He looked at her with that direct quality again. "You redid the third sector projections going back 4 months. That was beyond the scope of the correction." "The error affected more than August," she said. If I was going to fix it, it made sense to fix all of it. Did Greg ask you to do that? A pause. No. Did anyone ask you to do that? No? He was quiet for a moment. How many of these reports go out under other people's names? He asked. It was a careful question. Not your work specifically, but the general architecture of the place. She recognized the tact. I don't know what you mean, she said. I think you do. Another pause, longer this time. I do my job, she said. The rest isn't my business. Okay. He didn't push. I want to talk about your work specifically, though, not anyone else's. Yours. The analysis you submitted. Can you walk me through your methodology on the third sector restructuring? And here was the thing she'd been bracing for, some version of condescension or corporate theater, except he asked it like he genuinely wanted to know. And then he actually listened while she answered, not in the way people listen when they're waiting for you to finish, but in the way that meant he was tracking what she said and filing it somewhere useful. He asked 3 follow-up questions, each one sharper than the last. She answered all 3. Okay, he said when she finished. I want to offer you a position. She'd suspected this was coming and had spent the morning deciding how she felt about it. Senior financial analyst, he said, with direct reporting to my office. It would mean a significant increase in visibility, your name on the reports, representation in strategy meetings, the whole thing. Visibility. That word sat in her chest like a stone. I need time to think about it, she said. He nodded. That was it. Just a nod, no pressure, no salesperson energy. There's no rush, he said. She stood to leave. At the door, she stopped herself from asking the question for 3 full seconds, and then asked it anyway. The child's drawing, she said. Is that your daughter? Something changed in his face, not dramatically, just a softening around the edges that happened fast and then settled. Emma, he said. She's 6. She's convinced that all cats should have more legs because then they could run faster. She's been lobbying for this position for about 4 months. Has she made any progress? She convinced me that she had a strong structural argument, he said. I'm still reviewing the evidence. Olivia was smiling before she caught herself. The report, she said. I'll think about the position. Take your time. She walked back to the elevator. Her heart was doing something unfamiliar and inconvenient. She did not take the position. She asked for 2 more days to think, which became a week, which became her sending Paula a carefully worded email saying that she was grateful for the consideration, but preferred to remain in her current role at this time. Paula replied, Understood. Mr. Cole would still like your analysis input on the restructuring if you're open to it. No pressure. No pressure. She stared at those 2 words for a long time. Greg stopped by her cubicle that same afternoon with the specific energy of a man who had heard something and was trying to determine how much of a threat it was. Heard you had a meeting upstairs, he said, in the tone that pretended to be casual. Quarterly report follow-up, she said. Right. He lingered. If there's anything going on there, anything that affects the team, you know you can always come to me first as the team lead. Sure, Greg. He left. She watched him go. Team lead, she thought. Sure. Itung. Nathan Cole began stopping by the 14th floor. Not every day, maybe twice a week, sometimes once, and always with a reason. He needed data from a specific report. He had a question about a methodology. He wanted a second look at a projection figure that didn't match another document. The questions were legitimate. She checked. But he also, each time, spent a few extra minutes just talking. Not the performative small talk of corporate interaction, but actual talking. He asked her once what she thought about the proposed bond market restructuring that had been in the news. She told him carefully, then realized she'd been going for 3 minutes and stopped. Keep going, he said. She kept going. He asked her once, in the break room where she'd been eating lunch at 7:30 because she'd worked through noon, whether she ever actually left the building before sunset. Sometimes, she said. When? Weekends. He laughed. It was a real laugh. Not the networking kind, but the kind that surprised him slightly. Like her answer had been funnier than he'd expected. She liked that laugh more than she was comfortable with. The family event was a mistake. That was what she told herself afterward. A mistake, a lapse, a failure of the careful maintenance required to stay invisible. Hargrove Financial's fall employee event was technically optional, but Greg had sent a team email with enough passive-aggressive, non-optional energy that 5 of them had shown up on a Saturday afternoon to a rented event space in the West Loop that had a catered lunch and a supervised activity area for employees who'd brought their children. Olivia had not planned to stay longer than 45 minutes. She was standing near the back of the room with a plate she wasn't eating from when she felt something at approximately knee height make contact with her leg. She looked down. A small person was staring up at her. Dark hair and 2 uneven pigtails, clearly self-done, or done by someone who had tried their best and lost. Brown eyes with the particular focus of children who are deciding whether you are interesting. A purple dress with a sequined unicorn on the front. 1 shoe untied. "You have a big sweater," the small person said. "I do," Olivia agreed. "It looks like my grandma's couch." "That's—" She paused. "Yeah, that's fair." The child seemed satisfied by this response. She continued to stare. "Your glasses are big." "They are." "I need glasses, but my dad says I might not have to get them because my eyes might fix themselves. I want the pink ones." She tilted her head. "Are you sad?" The question arrived without preamble or warning, the way only children could deliver something like that. "I'm not sad," Olivia said. "You look a little sad. I'm just—" She stopped. What was she? Tired. Always tired, but not in a way she knew how to explain to a 6-year-old. "I'm a little tired." "My dad gets tired too," the child said, with the authority of someone reporting confirmed fact. "He works a lot. But then we watch movies and he feels better." She considered Olivia with the seriousness of someone making a decision. "I'm Emma." "I know," Olivia said. "I'm Olivia." Emma nodded, like this had been confirmed to her satisfaction. Then she held out her hand, a very formal gesture from a very small person. And Olivia shook it, because what else do you do? "Your shoe's untied," Olivia said. Emma looked down, then back up. "I can't do the bunny ears right." "Want me to show you?" Emma sat down on the floor immediately, with the decisiveness of someone who had been waiting for this offer. Olivia set her plate on the nearest table and crouched down. "Okay," she said. "Both laces equal length first. See how yours is uneven?" Emma nodded. "Fix that first, always." "Why?" "Because if they're uneven, the knot will be off-center and it'll come loose faster." "Oh." This seemed to make sense to Emma. "My dad always does it too fast for me to see." "Most people do." Olivia evened out the laces. "Okay, bunny ears are fine, but there's actually a faster way that makes a tighter knot. Do you want the fast version or the bunny version?" Emma considered this with genuine gravity. Fast version. Good choice. She walked her through it twice. Emma got it on the 3rd try, looked at her shoe, and then looked up at Olivia with the specific expression of a child who has just accomplished something real. "I did it," Emma said. "You did." "Can I learn the other one too?" Olivia had been kneeling on the floor of a corporate event space for 6 minutes, which was not what she'd planned for her Saturday. And she looked up and found Nathan Cole standing 8 feet away, watching them with an expression she'd never seen on him before. It wasn't the professional expression or the sharp analytical one, or even the laugh at something unexpected one. It was quieter than those. Softer. She stood up. He didn't say anything for a second. "She's been in a battle with her shoelaces for 3 months," he said finally. "She just needed the right technique." Emma was already working on her other shoe. "She doesn't do this with everyone," he said, carefully, like it meant something. "She's 6, Olivia said. "She does this with everyone interesting." "Emma's pretty selective, actually." He looked at his daughter, then back at Olivia. "I've been trying to get her to talk to her teacher for 2 weeks. She just stared at the woman." Olivia didn't know what to say to that, so she picked up her plate and said, "I should get back to—" "Stay," he said. Not demanding. It was too quiet for that. More like asking. She looked at the exit. She looked at Emma, who had finished her 2nd shoe and was now looking up at both of them with the particular intensity of a child who has already decided something. She stayed for 2 more hours. On the bus home, she looked out the window at the Chicago evening and told herself this was fine. It was a Saturday work event. She'd been polite. Nothing had happened. But she kept thinking about Emma's face when the knot held, and she kept thinking about Nathan's expression when he looked at his daughter, and she kept thinking about how for 2 hours she hadn't once thought about being invisible, which was, she knew, the most dangerous thing that had happened to her in 8 years. The email arrived on a Tuesday at 11:47 in the morning. She knew, the second she saw it, that it wasn't ordinary. The sender address was anonymous, a string of random letters and numbers from a generic domain, and the subject line said, "Thought you should see this before someone else sends it." She sat very still for a moment. Then she opened it. Inside were 3 photographs. She knew the photographs. She had been 22 years old when they first appeared, and in the 8 years since, she had done everything in her power to ensure they would never find her again. She had changed cities. She had changed her appearance. She had made herself small and gray and forgettable, and she had spent 8 years being exactly those things. The body of the email was brief. "Your boss might find these interesting." She read it twice. Then she closed her email, picked up her bag, and went to the bathroom, where she sat in a stall and pressed her back against the metal door and breathed for 4 minutes, counting the way she'd learned to when she was 23 and living alone in a studio apartment and needed to stop herself from coming apart completely. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. When she felt like herself again, or the version of herself she'd constructed in the last 8 years, she came out of the stall, washed her hands, looked at herself in the mirror. The face looking back was controlled and still. "You knew this couldn't last," she told it. "You knew someone would find it eventually. You knew." She walked back to her desk. She opened her resignation letter template. She'd had one saved, updated quarterly, ever since she took this job, and began to fill in today's date. She was still typing when her phone rang. "Olivia," Nathan's voice, steady, unhurried. "Can you come up to 18? She closed the document without saving. "When?" "Now if you can." She took the stairs, all 18 floors. By the time she reached his floor, her face was composed and her hands were steady, and she had decided she would go in, she would be professional, she would not apologize for something she had never done, and she would resign with 2 weeks' notice, and then she would leave this city and go somewhere else and start again, and this time she would do it better. She would make herself smaller, she would make herself disappear. Paula waved her toward his office. She knocked, walked in. Nathan was standing at the window again. When he turned around, his expression wasn't what she'd steeled herself for. Not the distant corporate face, or the cautious pity face, or even the politely devastating HR face. He looked tired, like something was weighing on him. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." He looked at her for a moment. "Okay." "Whatever you received," she started. "Olivia, I'm not going to make this difficult. I understand if you need me to." "Olivia." His voice was gentle, but it had enough weight to stop her. "I didn't call you up here to let you go." She stopped. "Then why?" "Because someone sent me something I think you should know about," he said. "And I wanted to be the one to tell you. Not HR, not an email, me." The room was quiet except for the distant sound of the city outside. "I hired someone to look into it," he said. "The photographs." The words sat between them like something fragile. "That's..." Her voice was steadier than she expected. "That's not something I asked you to do." "I know." He didn't apologize for it. "I did it anyway." "You had no right." "I know that too." He moved to the desk, picked up a folder and held it out. "I'm not sure what to do with that except tell you what they found." She didn't take the folder. "The photographs were manipulated," he said. "Digitally. Whoever made them was good. Good enough that it wasn't obvious, but not perfect." He set the folder down on the desk, close enough for her to reach. The metadata on 2 of the original files was traced to a company that had, at the time those photos appeared, a significant financial relationship with the Ashford family, specifically with the company Daniel Ashford's father was running. The silence after those words was very long. "What company?" she said. He told her the name. She knew it. She had worked 3 floors below that company's former client accounts for 8 years without knowing. "The working theory," Nathan said quietly, "is that someone in that network had a reason to want your engagement to end. You had access to Ashford family financial information that..." He stopped. "They were afraid of what you might see." She absorbed this slowly. "They destroyed me," she said, "because they were afraid I'd look at the wrong spreadsheet." "Yes." "They didn't even..." Her voice cracked, just once, and she pressed her teeth together until it stopped. "They didn't even know I would. They just decided it was easier to eliminate the risk," he said. She stood very still. "Olivia," he said, "don't." She held up one hand. "Don't say something kind right now, please. I need a minute." He didn't say anything. She stood at the window and looked at Chicago. 8 years of this city. 8 years of making herself disappear. 8 years of her mother's careful voice, and Daniel's courier-delivered ring, and the colleagues who hadn't made eye contact on her last day. 8 years of believing, somewhere underneath everything, that maybe she'd done something. Maybe she'd been careless. Maybe she'd deserved some portion of it. She hadn't. She hadn't done anything. "I'm not going to cry in your office," she said finally, to the window. "You can if you want." "I'm not going to." "Okay." She turned around. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was level. Her hands were not shaking, which she was grateful for. "I'll still need time to think about the position," she said. Nathan Cole looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and then he said, "Take all the time you need." She walked to the door, and she held it together all the way down the stairs, all the way through the 14th floor to the supply closet corner. And she sat in her chair and she put her hands flat on the desk, and she looked at her succulent in its white pot and the face-down photograph, and the fighting. Illini mug with the pens. And she thought, 8 years, 8 whole years. She didn't cry. But she didn't open the resignation letter either. She didn't open the resignation letter for 3 days. It sat in her drafts folder like a loaded question. Subject line blank, body text half finished, the cursor blinking in the space where she'd stopped typing. Every morning she opened her laptop, saw it sitting there, and closed it again. Not a decision, exactly. More like a postponement. One more day, just one more. The corrected quarterly report had gone out under her name. That was the first thing she noticed on Wednesday morning when the finalized document landed in the company-wide distribution. Not Greg's name in the author field, not Hargrove Financial Analysis Team, but Olivia Bennett, Senior Financial Analyst, acting. She stared at it for a long time. Greg appeared at her cubicle by 9. "Just so you know," he said, in the voice he used when he was angry but had decided to perform reasonableness. That title designation was put in by Nathan's office. "I wasn't consulted." "Okay," she said. "I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just saying I wasn't consulted." "Okay, Greg." He lingered for another few seconds, which was what he did when he wanted someone to ask him to elaborate, then left when she didn't. She looked at her name in the author field again. Olivia Bennett. Just sitting there, public, on a document that would go to board members and senior leadership and clients and anybody who requested it. Her first instinct was to ask someone to change it. Her second instinct, quieter, newer, something she'd been afraid to let herself have, was to leave it alone. She left it alone. That afternoon, she got a calendar invitation from Paula. Standing meeting, Thursdays 2 p.m., Nathan Cole's office, financial strategy review. She accepted it before she could think too hard about whether she should. This was how it started, not with any single dramatic moment, but with small decisions accumulating like sediment. Her name on a document, a meeting accepted, a lunch break actually taken in the break room instead of at her desk. Nathan never mentioned what he'd told her in his office about the photographs. He didn't bring it up the following Thursday when she came upstairs and they spent 90 minutes going through the proposed restructuring of the company's mid-tier portfolio, and he didn't bring it up the Thursday after that. He simply behaved like someone who had filed the information away and was now waiting for her to do something with it on her own timeline. She found this more disorienting than anything else he could have done. Their Thursday meeting settled into a rhythm that felt, after the third week, almost normal. She'd come up at 2 with her laptop, and whatever she'd been working on, he'd have coffee already made. Black for him, and he'd started keeping a box of English breakfast tea because she'd mentioned once offhandedly that she didn't like coffee, which she'd thought he hadn't registered. They'd work through whatever she'd brought. He'd ask questions she had to actually think about, and then somewhere around 3:30, they'd end up talking about something adjacent to work. A market trend. An article one of them had read. A policy decision that was making its way through the financial news cycle. Once she arrived and found him on the phone, clearly in the middle of something complicated, waving her to the chair with an apologetic look. She sat down and started reading through her own materials, and he finished the call 8 minutes later and said, without preamble, "Sorry, Emma's preschool called. There was an incident involving a fire truck made of Legos and another child's finger. Is everyone okay?" "The Lego fire truck is fine. The finger needed ice." He sat down, rubbed the back of his neck. "She's 6. She's trying to construct an operational emergency vehicle fleet. I genuinely don't know what to do with that." "Encourage it," Olivia said. "It keeps injuring people." "The engineering impulse, not the specific vehicle." She paused. She's 6 and building multi-component structures with moving parts. That's not a behavior problem. That's a skill set. Nathan was quiet for a second. Her teacher disagrees, he said. Her teacher's wrong. He looked at her, and then something that had been tense around his mouth released. Yeah, he said. Her teacher's wrong. They got back to work. But the moment sat with her on the bus home. The easy naturalness of it. The way she'd said what she thought without editing herself first. She hadn't done that with someone in a very long time. It scared her, a little, how much she hadn't hated it. The Thursdays were professional. That was what she told herself, firmly, when she found herself thinking about them on days they weren't happening. They were work meetings with a direct application to her job, and the fact that they felt different from work meetings was a perception problem she needed to manage, not a reality she needed to acknowledge. She was very good at managing perception problems. She had built her entire life around it, but Nathan Cole was making it difficult. The issue was that he didn't perform consideration. Most people, when they wanted something from you, had a quality to their attention that was slightly off. A watchfulness. An agenda lurking just below the surface. She'd gotten good at reading it, had developed a specific sensitivity to it over the years, the way someone who's been burned gets careful around heat. Nathan wasn't watchful. He was just present. When she talked, he listened the way you listen to something that actually matters. When she said something he found interesting, his reaction was immediate and unguarded. When he disagreed, which he did occasionally because he had actual opinions and wasn't performing deference, he said so directly and without softening it into something useless. She appreciated the directness more than she expected to. You disagree with the accelerated timeline, she said, in their 4th Thursday meeting. I do. The committee projection supports it. The committee projection is optimistic in a way that makes me nervous. He turned his laptop to show her the spreadsheet. Look at the Q2 assumptions. They're assuming a 12% market uptick in a quarter where the sector historically underperforms. Why are they assuming that? She looked. She'd had the same question and hadn't said it out loud. Because it supports the conclusion they wanted to reach, she said. Right. He sat back. Which tells me someone built the projection backward from the answer. That's not analysis, that's decoration. She looked at him sideways. You said that in the board meeting last week. I did. Hendricks looked like you'd kicked his dog. Hendricks built the projection. He shrugged, but there was a slight smile. I wasn't wrong. You weren't wrong, but you could have framed it more diplomatically. I could have. He paused. Do you think I should have? She thought about it honestly. No, she said. Someone needed to say it out loud. The whole room knew it anyway. He was looking at her with that quality again, focused and without agenda. You'd have said it more diplomatically, he said. I wouldn't have said it at all. Why not? She looked back at her screen. Old habit. The pause that followed was careful on both their parts. Him not pushing, her not elaborating, the space between them holding something they'd both decided, by unspoken agreement, to leave alone for now. The Sunday between their 4th and 5th Thursday came with the first real snow of the year, which arrived in Chicago the way early snow always did. Overnight, without apology, transforming the city by morning into something that looked temporary and clean. Olivia woke up to 4 inches on her windowsill and stood in her kitchen with her coffee cup, the real one, not the office mug, watching the alley below fill up with white. She should have stayed in. She'd planned to work through the weekend on the restructuring analysis, a voluntary project she'd taken on because Nathan had mentioned in passing that the board would need a second opinion document by the end of the month, and she'd gone home thinking about it until she'd had to write things down just to get them out of her head. Instead, she put on her coat and went for a walk. She walked 12 blocks north to the Andersonville neighborhood, where she knew a used bookstore that opened at 10 on Sundays and had a section of financial history texts that most bookstores didn't bother to stock. She bought 3 books she didn't need and a collection of short stories she'd been meaning to read for 2 years. And she walked back with the bag under her arm and her boots making clean prints in the fresh snow. She felt, for no good reason she could articulate, almost okay. When she got home, there was a text from a number she'd saved as Nathan Cole, work, because she'd felt it necessary to add the qualifier, to be clear with herself about the nature of the contact. That said, Emma wants to know if you're the one who taught her the shoe trick. Apparently she's been teaching the other kids at school, and they've been calling it the Olivia knot. I said I'd ask. She sat on her couch with her coat still on and read the message twice. She typed, "Tell her yes," and tell her she can call it whatever she wants. His response came back in under a minute. She says thank you and also that she is going to name it officially and write it in a book. I told her books required publishers. She said she'd find one. Olivia was laughing before she realized she was doing it. Actually laughing. The kind that surprised her because it came from somewhere genuine. And she put the phone face down on the cushion and pressed her hands over her face and sat there for a moment in the complicated feeling of being happy about something when you'd spent 8 years trying not to want things. The happiness was real. That was the problem. She was starting to want this, and she didn't know what to do with that except be afraid of it. The Thursday after the snow, she came upstairs and he was on a call that ran long, and Paula waved her toward the office with the resigned expression of someone managing an agenda that never stayed on schedule. Olivia sat in the chair and waited and looked at Emma's 6-legged cat on the shelf, which had been joined, she noticed, by a new drawing, a taller stick figure and a smaller one, with the smaller one wearing what appeared to be a crown, labeled in unsteady 6-year-old printing, Daddy and Emma, the Queen. Nathan came off the call looking like someone had spent the last 30 minutes explaining something obvious to him, which she recognized as a specific kind of tired. "Sorry," he said. "Bad one?" "Acquisition meeting." He sat down. "The other party keeps trying to revalue the same asset twice under different names." "What's the asset?" he told her. "That's not worth what they're saying it's worth," she said. "I know. My team knows. They know we know." He picked up his coffee, realized it was cold, set it down. "They're just betting we'll get tired of the back and forth and pay it anyway." "Will you?" "No." Flat and final. "I don't pay for things twice just because someone's patient." She believed him. That was one of the things she'd noticed about Nathan Cole over the weeks. He meant what he said, with a consistency that was different from stubbornness. He wasn't inflexible. She'd watched him change his position twice in meetings when someone made a better argument. But he didn't bend because someone applied pressure. He bent because someone was right. She'd known very few people like that. They worked through the strategy review, and toward the end of the meeting he asked if she'd thought more about making the acting designation permanent. "Senior analyst," she said, just to confirm the parameters. "Director of financial analysis," he said. "We're reclassifying the role." She looked up. "That's different from what you originally offered." "It is." "Why?" "Because the work you've been doing for the last 6 weeks is director-level work. It would be inaccurate to call it anything else." He said this plainly, like it was just arithmetic. "The salary adjustment is significant. You'd be presenting to the board quarterly." Presenting to the board. She heard the words and felt them land in a part of her chest that had been trained for years to receive things like this with immediate refusal. "Nathan," she said, "you don't have to decide right now. I know." She pressed her hands flat on her knees. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why does it matter to you whether my name's on the work, whether I'm visible in the structure?" She tried to keep her voice clinical, analytical, like it was a business question. "You could run the same operation with me in the same role I'm in now. The output would be identical." He was quiet for a moment. "Because the output wouldn't be identical," he said finally, "because you'd still be invisible. And the company would be lying about who's actually doing the work. That's a business argument. It's also a different argument." He leaned forward slightly. "You're good at this. Better than half the people above you in this building. And you know that because you're not an idiot, and it has to—" He stopped, started again, more carefully. "It has to cost something to be good at something and have someone else take credit for it. Every day. For years." She kept her face still. "I manage," she said. "I'm sure you do." He didn't say it unkindly. "I'm asking if you want to keep managing, or if you want something different." The question was too direct. She wasn't ready for it to be that direct. "I'll think about it," she said. She thought about it on the bus home. She thought about it during dinner, standing at her counter. And she thought about it at 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep and went to sit on her couch in the dark with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold. She thought about what it would mean to have her name somewhere public and permanent. She thought about the photographs in the anonymous email, still sitting in her deleted folder, and whether the person who'd sent it to Nathan had been satisfied with the silence or was waiting for the right moment to do more. She thought about Emma's drawing on the shelf. Daddy and Emma, the Queen. She thought about how, for 8 years, she had kept herself safe by staying small. And she thought about how safe, lately, had started to feel less like protection and more like a cell she'd gotten used to. She didn't sleep well. 2 days later, she emailed Paula. Please tell Mr. Cole I'd like to accept the director position, effective the start of next month, on the condition that we discuss the transition timeline and reporting structure first. Paula replied within 10 minutes. Thursday's meeting will work. He says, and I'm quoting directly here, good, just good. She stared at that for a while, then turned back to her spreadsheet. The transition was not smooth, because transitions involving other people's egos rarely are. Greg Paulson took the news with the particular expression of a man who had been expecting it for 3 weeks and had spent that time preparing not to show how much it bothered him, which meant he was visibly bothered from the first moment. Congratulations, he said, in a tone that managed to contain both the word and its opposite simultaneously. Thank you, Greg. It's a big jump, Director. He picked up a pen from her old desk, looked at it, set it back down. You sure you're ready for the exposure, board presentations, media-facing stuff? I'll manage, she said, which was the same thing she'd said to Nathan, except this time she meant it differently. She moved her things to the new office on the 15th floor on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't a large office. It had a window, which felt significant, and a door that closed, and enough space for her to set up her monitors the way she wanted. She put the succulent on the windowsill. She put the Fighting Illini mug on the desk. She left the face-down photograph in the box. She wasn't sure why she'd brought it at all. The first board presentation was in the second week of November. 17 people in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor, the kind of space designed to make you aware of your own heartbeat. She'd prepared for 3 days, rehearsed the verbal portions in her apartment with the door closed, rebuilt her slide deck twice. Nathan was in the room, but he didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat to one side with his usual notepad and gave her the floor without ceremony. She presented for 41 minutes. Hendricks, who'd been running financial analysis presentations at Hargrove for 11 years, asked 3-pointed questions during the Q&A that were designed more to establish his own expertise than to interrogate her data. She answered all 3 and then, on the third one, politely dismantled the assumption behind the question before addressing it, which caused Nathan to make a small note on his pad and caused Hendricks to clear his throat. After the room cleared, Paula caught her in the hallway and said quietly, "That was the best board presentation I've seen in 4 years at this company. And I've seen a lot of bad ones." Olivia blinked. "Thank you." "I'm not flattering you. I'm a very poor flatterer." Paula was already walking. "Thursday's meeting time is moving to 3, by the way. Emma has a school thing at 2:30. Olivia was still processing the fact that Nathan had apparently mentioned his daughter's schedule to his executive assistant in the context of adjusting her work meeting, which was a small, strange thing that lodged itself in her chest without her permission. The board presentation got her a mention in the company's monthly internal newsletter. Her name, her photo. A LinkedIn headshot from years ago that someone had dug up and that she looked at for a long time before clicking away. And 3 sentences about the new direction of the financial analysis department. Her phone got 2 texts that day from numbers she didn't recognize, both congratulatory, clearly from people she'd worked with before in other contexts. She replied to both with brief thanks, and then spent an hour wondering how many people had found that newsletter. Her mother called that evening. Olivia almost didn't answer. She'd maintained a careful relationship with her mother for years. Dutiful phone calls on birthdays and major holidays, the occasional text, a visit at Christmas that both of them endured with polite effort. Her mother wasn't a bad person. She was someone who had made a decision in a crisis and had never been able to walk it back without admitting what it had cost. "I saw something about your company online," her mother said when she answered. "The newsletter. Your photo." A pause. "You look different." "I cut my hair." She hadn't particularly, but something had shifted in how she was carrying herself. And apparently it showed in a 4-year-old LinkedIn photo. "You look good," her mother said, and there was something effortful in how she said it, like a woman climbing toward a thing she couldn't quite reach. "Thank you. Are you—" Another pause. "Are you doing well?" "Really?" Olivia leaned against the window of her apartment, looking at the November city. "I'm getting there," she said. It was the most honest thing she'd said to her mother in 8 years. The silence that followed was the kind that held more than 2 people usually say out loud. Her mother said quietly, "I'm glad." And Olivia knew that wasn't enough, and also knew that it was something, and she stayed on the phone for another 11 minutes and talked about work and the weather and nothing important. And when she hung up, she stood in her kitchen for a while with the feeling of a wound that had been closed for so long you'd forgotten it was there. And then you moved wrong and felt the pull of it. She went to bed early. She didn't sleep well. She hadn't, in general, since the week Nathan had told her what he'd found. The information sat inside her and did things she hadn't finished processing, rearranging things, undoing conclusions she'd been living inside for years. She'd been innocent. She'd known she was innocent, the way you know something you can't prove, and so learned to stop expecting the world to believe. But knowing it and having evidence were different experiences, and the difference was doing something to her. It was making her angry, for one thing. Not the immediate white-hot kind, but she'd moved through that years ago, when it first happened, when she'd sat alone in that studio apartment and felt something that burned so hot it scared her. This was different, quieter and colder. The anger of someone who has been calm for a very long time and is now running out of reasons to stay that way. She hadn't done anything with that anger yet. She wasn't sure she would, but she could feel it under everything, a low heat changing the shape of things. On a Thursday in late November, 3 weeks after the board presentation, Nathan asked her to stay a few minutes after their meeting. Paula had already left. The floor was quiet. The light through the office window had the particular quality of late afternoon November light in Chicago, which was gray and direct and somehow also flat, like the city was tired. He said, "Emma wants to know if you'd come to her school play." Olivia went very still. "Her school play," she repeated. "December 6th, she's playing a tree." He looked at her with the kind of expression she'd come to recognize as his actual face. Not the executive one, the human one. "She drew you a program. It has your name on it. She's been working on it for a week." She drew me a program. "It includes a detailed illustration of the tree costume." He paused. "You are listed, I should mention, as special guest." Olivia pressed her fingers together. This was the thing she'd been trying not to look at directly. Not the Thursday meetings, not the texts about the shoelace knot, not the tea she found on the credenza of his office like someone had thought to stalk it. All of those were things she could categorize under professional relationship with human dimensions, which was a category that existed and was manageable. Emma was different. Emma was 6 years old and had decided Olivia was a person worth drawing programs for, and that was not something Olivia knew how to put in a professional category. "Nathan," she said. "You can say no," he said. "I told her you're busy. She accepts that you might be busy, but she wanted me to ask anyway because, and I quote, people who are busy can still come to important things if they want to." The 6-year-old logic of that was perfectly irrefutable. "She's not wrong," Olivia said. "She's frequently right," he said, with a quality in his voice that parents get when they're talking about their kids to someone who might actually care. "She gets it from somewhere I can't identify. It's not me." "Maybe it is you." He looked at her. "You're frequently right too," she said. "You're just more annoying about it." He laughed. The real one, the surprised one. She realized, been deliberately trying to make him laugh. That was a new thing. That was the thing she needed to examine later, alone, in her apartment, with sufficient distance. "I'll come to the play," she said. "Yeah?" "She drew me a program. That seems like the kind of effort you show up for." The quality that came into his face was not quite relief and not quite happiness. It was more complex than either of those, the way real emotions usually were. "She's going to be—" "I'll tell her," he said. "She'll be—" "Yeah." "The tree costume," Olivia said. "Is it a large tree or a small tree?" "It's ambitious," he said. "I've been told it required 2 cardboard boxes and a significant quantity of green felt. I'll prepare myself." She left his office and took the elevator down to 15. She sat at her desk in the office with the window and the succulent on the sill and the Fighting Illini mug full of pens, and she opened her laptop and tried to work. She read the same sentence 4 times. December 6th was 2 weeks away, and Emma Cole had drawn her a program with her name on it, and the impossible thing, the thing she'd been trying not to look at, was that she wanted to go. Not because she felt obligated, not because it was professionally useful, not because Nathan had asked. She wanted to go because she missed being someone a child wanted to draw a program for. She'd forgotten, in 8 years of being invisible, that there were things you lost when you made yourself small. Not just opportunities or career advancement or the kind of life other people her age seemed to be building without apparent effort. Small things. The things that happened between people when they trusted each other enough to be themselves. She had given all of that up to stay safe. And now a 6-year-old with uneven pigtails was quietly, methodically, and without any awareness of what she was doing, dismantling 8 years of careful architecture. Olivia stared at her laptop screen. She thought about calling her mother back. She thought about the face-down photograph in the box she'd brought from her old desk, still unlooked at. She thought about the anonymous email in her deleted folder, and whether the person who'd sent it was done. She decided, sitting in her office in the November quiet, that she was tired. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of the last 8 years, though that was there too, underneath everything, always. But tired of waiting for something bad to happen. Tired of organizing her whole existence around the prevention of pain. Tired of choosing small. She turned the photograph over. She'd been 22 when it was taken. Her and Daniel at some event. She couldn't even remember which one now. Her in a blue dress she'd borrowed from a roommate, smiling the way you smile when you think you have everything figured out. She looked at the girl in the photograph for a long time. Then she put it back down. Not face down, just down. It was a small thing, one small thing. She turned back to her screen and started working. Outside, Chicago was already dark at 4:30, the way it got in November, and the city lights were coming on in the buildings across the skyline. Hundreds of lit windows in the gray dusk, each one containing some version of a life being lived. She had a tree play to go to in 2 weeks. For the first time in longer than she could remember, that thought didn't scare her. The school auditorium smelled like industrial cleaner and construction paper, which was exactly the right smell for a place that was trying very hard to be more important than it was. Olivia arrived 7 minutes early, which for her was practically late, and stood near the back of the room holding the hand-drawn program Emma had apparently sent home with Nathan 2 days prior with strict instructions that it be delivered before the event. The program was 4 pages of folded copy paper, stapled slightly off-center, with a cover illustration of a large green tree wearing what appeared to be a tiara. Underneath the tree, in Emma's careful but still developing printing, the winter show, special guest, Olivia, not Olivia Bennett, not Ms. Bennett. Just Olivia, with a period after it, like punctuation was a formality Emma had decided to observe without fully committing to. She had looked at it 3 times on the bus over and then folded it carefully into her coat pocket. The auditorium was filling with the particular energy of a children's school event, parents with phones already raised, younger siblings being managed at various degrees of success, a grandmother in the front row who had clearly dressed for an occasion significantly more formal than a first-grade winter play. Nathan was near the middle section, already saving the seat beside him in the way people save seats when they're expecting someone they're mildly nervous about, which was to say he was sitting with his jacket on the seat and checking the door with a frequency he probably didn't realize was visible. He saw her. The jacket came off the seat. She made her way down the row. "You made it," he said. "I said I would." "I know, He stopped. "Emma's been asking approximately every 40 minutes since Tuesday whether you confirmed." "I confirmed on Tuesday." "I know. She's 6. Confirmation doesn't have a time limit for her." Olivia sat down, put her coat in her lap, and looked at the stage where a first grader in a shepherd costume was being herded back into the wings by a harried-looking teacher. She felt the warm, crowded, slightly too loud atmosphere of the room settle around her. She hadn't been in a school auditorium since she was in one herself, and the specific smell of it, the construction paper and the cleaner, and underneath those, the softer smell of children's things, paste and worn crayons and something indefinably young, moved through her in a way she hadn't prepared for. "She worked on that program for 4 days, Nathan said quietly, nodding at Olivia's coat pocket where the edge of the folded paper was visible. "I can tell. The tree has excellent posture." He smiled. "She spent a long time on the tiara. I was informed that trees in important plays wear tiaras." She's not wrong. The lights dimmed. A teacher came to the microphone at the side of the stage, said the things teachers said at these events. "Thank you for coming. Please silence your phones. The children have worked very hard." And then the curtains opened and 20 first graders arranged themselves on the stage with the collective determined focus of small people who have rehearsed something until it lived in their muscle memory. Emma was the third tree from the left. The costume was, as Nathan had suggested, ambitious. 2 cardboard boxes had been painted brown for the trunk, connected by what appeared to be a carefully cut hole so Emma could stand inside them. The leafy portion was constructed from layers of green felt attached to a wire frame that sat around her shoulders like a very enthusiastic collar, giving her a silhouette that was more sphere than tree, but communicated the essential idea with commitment. On top of the felt crown, a small silver tiara. Her face was visible above the trunk box, expression fixed in the particular concentration of a child who has been told not to wave at their parent in the audience and is working very hard to comply. She saw Olivia. The concentration broke for approximately 3 seconds, a flash of something so purely delighted that Olivia felt it like a hand pressing briefly against her sternum. Then Emma recovered, faced forward, and resumed her tree posture. Beside her, Olivia heard Nathan let out a breath. "She saw you," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "She held it together," Olivia said. "Strong focus for a 6-year-old. She's been practicing not waving." He paused. "She told me at breakfast she was worried about waving." The play was 23 minutes long, involved a plot about woodland creatures preparing for winter that Olivia couldn't entirely follow, but which seemed to hinge on whether a squirrel had gathered enough acorns and required the trees to stand very still for long stretches, while other children delivered their lines around them. Emma stood still with the focused sincerity of a professional. At one point, a child in a chipmunk costume bumped into her trunk box and nearly dislodged it, and Emma grabbed the box with both hands, steadied it, set her face back to neutral, and looked at no one as though nothing had happened. Olivia pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. Nathan made a small sound beside her that suggested he was doing the same thing. After the play, in the gymnasium where the school had set up a reception with juice boxes and store-bought cookies, Emma found them in approximately 4 seconds. She had removed the cardboard trunk but was still wearing the felt crown and the tiara, which she apparently had no intention of giving up. "You came," she said to Olivia, with the gravity of someone confirming an important fact. "I said I would." "I know, but sometimes adults say they will, and then they don't." Emma delivered this assessment without particular bitterness, just the straightforward empirical reporting of a child who has cataloged human behavior and is sharing her findings. "That's fair," Olivia said. "I'm sorry that happens." "It's okay." Emma appeared to have moved past this. "Did you see me hold the box? When Marcus hit me?" "I saw. Good recovery." Emma nodded with satisfaction. "I practiced falling." She considered this. "I didn't fall, but I practiced in case." "That's the right approach." Emma looked at Olivia the way she had the first time, that direct, assessing look that saw more than most adults gave her credit for. "Are you my dad's friend?" The question arrived without warning and sat in the air waiting. "Yes," Olivia said after a... "He doesn't have that many friends," Emma said, matter-of-factly. "He has work people, and then Marcus's dad, Phil, who they watch football with sometimes. But Phil talks a lot about trucks." Nathan, who had been getting juice boxes from the table and was close enough to hear this, turned back with an expression that was somewhere between mortified and helpless. "Emma, it's true," Emma said. "It's not... I have friends." "Name them." A pause. "Phil?" "Phil is a trucks friend, not a real friend." Olivia was looking at the gymnasium floor, which was the only way she could keep her face straight. "I have work friends," Nathan said, with the dignity of a man who has lost control of the conversation and knows it. "Those are also not real friends," Emma said patiently. She looked back at Olivia. "You're different, though." "Different how?" Olivia asked. Emma thought about it seriously, pulling on a strand of her hair the way she did when she was working through something. "You don't talk to my dad like he's the boss. You talk to him like he's a person." Nathan said nothing. Olivia could feel him not saying anything beside her, which had a particular weight to it. "He is a person," Olivia said. "I know," Emma said, "but lots of people forget." The reception went another 20 minutes, and Emma moved between her parents and classmates with the social confidence of someone who had thoroughly decided where she stood on most things. Twice she came back to Olivia to report information, once to say that the squirrel boy had apologized for his acorn line delivery, which she felt could have been stronger, and once to show her a friendship bracelet she'd made in class that week. "You can have it," Emma said, holding it out. It was made of embroidery floss in purple and green, slightly uneven, the clasp a simple overhand knot. "Emma," Nathan started. "She doesn't have to..." "I want to," Emma said. She looked at Olivia. "If you want it." Olivia took the bracelet, She put it on her left wrist over her coat sleeve, where it sat slightly too loose but held. "Thank you," she said. Emma examined the result and appeared satisfied. She went back to her friends. Olivia stood in the gymnasium in the noise and the juice box smell and the felt crown energy of a first-grade winter play reception, and felt something she didn't have a clean word for, something that was not quite sadness and not quite happiness, but lived in the same neighborhood as both. On the walk to the parking lot, Emma between them holding both their hands because she'd decided that was the arrangement, Nathan said quietly, "Thank you for coming." "The program had my name on it," she said, hard to decline. "Still." He looked at her sideways, in the parking lot light. "It meant something." "I know," she said. And she did. Emma tugged their hands simultaneously. "Can we get hot chocolate?" "It's a school night," Nathan said. "It's 7 o'clock. That's why it's a school night. Hot chocolate doesn't have bedtime." Olivia looked at him. He looked at her. The situation was what it was. They got hot chocolate. She rode the bus home at 9:15 with the friendship bracelet on her wrist and the hand-drawn program in her coat pocket, and the memory of Emma's face when she'd seen her in the audience. And she looked out the window at the December Chicago streets and tried to figure out what she was feeling. She couldn't name it cleanly. That was the problem with real things. They didn't resolve into something you could file away and manage. They just stayed present, requiring you to keep sitting with them. She sat with it. The week after the play, something shifted between her and Nathan in a way that was gradual enough to be deniable and significant enough that she noticed. The Thursday meetings were the same structurally. Her data, his questions, the back and forth of two people who had figured out how to think alongside each other. But the quality of the space between the work had changed. Less professional buffer, less careful navigation around the fact that they were two people who had, over the course of 2 months, started to genuinely know each other. He told her, in the middle of a conversation about a bond analysis, that he'd been having trouble sleeping. "Emma woke up with a nightmare at 2, he said. "Which is fine, that's a normal thing, but then I couldn't get back down after." "What do you do?" she asked. "When you can't sleep?" "Walk around the apartment. Look at things." He paused. "I made coffee at 3:15, which was a mistake in retrospect." "I read," she said, "or I work, which is also a mistake in retrospect." "What were you working on at 2 in the morning?" "The February projections." He looked at her with an expression that was partially exasperated and partially something else. "Olivia." "I know." "You're going to I know." "The February projections are not due until—" "February, yes, I know. My brain doesn't care about due dates." He shook his head, but the something else in his expression didn't go away. She recognized it, that specific look. She'd cataloged it without meaning to over the weeks. It showed up when she said something unexpected, or when she held her ground on an analysis he'd questioned, or when she made him laugh by accident. It was the expression of someone who kept discovering that you were more than they'd already understood, and was finding this genuinely interesting rather than inconvenient. She knew what that expression meant. She knew what it meant because she recognized the shape of it, had felt its equivalent in herself, growing quietly and without permission over the weeks. Something that lived in how she looked forward to Thursdays, in how she noticed when he was tired, in how she'd stored the information that he made coffee at 3:15 when he couldn't sleep, and had felt, unreasonably, like she knew something important. She was not ready to do anything with this. She wasn't sure she'd ever be ready, but she was honest with herself. Alone in her apartment in the December dark. In a way she hadn't been honest with herself in years. She was not indifferent to Nathan Cole. She had stopped being indifferent somewhere around the second Thursday. And the process had been so gradual and so counterintuitive to everything she'd built in the last 8 years that she'd almost missed noticing it happen. She noticed now. She did not know what to do with that, except keep showing up on Thursdays, and keep doing her work, and keep being careful. It was December 14th when the second email arrived. She was at her desk at 11 in the morning, working through a presentation deck for the Q1 board meeting, when the notification appeared. Different address from the first one, but the same format. The string of random characters, the generic domain, the subject line designed to feel like casual concern. Wanted to make sure you saw this. Inside was a link to a web forum she recognized from 8 years ago. The post was recent, time-stamped that morning, and it included the photographs again, same as the first time, along with her name. Her new name, her current name, her name that was now on board presentations and a company directory, and an internal newsletter. The post had been up for 2 hours. She closed her laptop. She sat very still for a long minute, hands flat on her desk, feeling the cold understanding move through her of exactly what was happening. Whoever had done this the first time hadn't been satisfied with the silence. The first email, sent to Nathan, had failed. Nathan hadn't done what they'd expected, hadn't fired her or withdrawn or quietly made the problem disappear. The situation had done the opposite of what they'd intended. She was more visible now, not less. So they were escalating. She picked up her phone. She looked at Nathan's contact, still saved as Nathan Cole, work, which now seemed absurd given that she knew what he drank and how he slept and what his daughter's face looked like when she saw someone she'd been hoping would show up. She texted him, "Can you call me when you have a minute?" He called in 4 minutes. "What happened?" he said when she answered. Not a question. He'd read the tone in the text. She told him about the forum post. She gave him the link. She kept her voice level, which cost something, and she sat at her desk with her hand pressed flat against the wood and talked through it the way she would have talked through a problem that belonged to someone else. "Okay," he said when she finished. He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. She counted. "Don't touch the post. Don't respond to anything. I'm calling someone." "Nathan, I know you can handle this alone. That's not the point." She pressed her teeth together. "The point," he continued, "is that you shouldn't have to." The silence after that was short. "Okay," she said. "Are you all right?" She almost gave him the automatic answer. "Fine, I'm fine, I manage," and then stopped herself. "I'm angry," she said. "Good." His voice had the quality it got when he'd made a decision and was calm on the other side of it. "You should be. Stay angry. I'll call you back within the hour." He called back in 50 minutes. "I have a name," he said. "I want to tell you in person." She went up to 18. His office had the December afternoon light in it, low and flat through the windows, the city gray outside. And he was standing when she came in, not at the window this time, but near the desk, in the posture of someone who has been sitting with something heavy and has decided to meet it standing up. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." "I know." He didn't argue it. "The person who sent the emails, both of them, works for a private consulting firm that has a long-term contract with Whitmore Capital. Do you know Whitmore?" She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago finance knew the name. "Ashford Family Money," she said slowly, "one of their investment vehicles. The oldest one. The one Daniel's father actually controls." He looked at her steadily. "The theory from 8 years ago, that someone wanted your engagement to end because of what you might access. We can prove more of it now." "How much more?" "Enough." He picked up a folder, set it back down. "The consulting firm that fabricated the photographs was paid from a subsidiary 3 layers removed from Whitmore. My investigator traced it through shell accounts that were sloppy in ways that only look sloppy in retrospect. They were good enough at the time." She absorbed this. "So, Daniel's father," she said. "Almost certainly." He paused. "There's no way to prove Daniel didn't know. There's also no hard evidence that he did." She heard the carefulness in how he said that, the professional precision of it, the acknowledgement that evidence was different from likelihood. "I don't need to know about Daniel," she said. "What I need to know is whether this is over." "No." He was direct. "Whoever activated the consulting firm did it because you became visible again. The newsletter, the board presentations. They got nervous. So the solution is to become invisible again." He looked at her. "No." That was sarcasm. "I know." He leaned against the edge of the desk, a thing he did when he was thinking, she'd noticed, like he needed the physical grounding. "We can pursue this legally. What was done to you was illegal. The photograph fabrication, the coordinated defamation. The statute of limitations on this kind of civil action is longer than most people think." "I know what it is," she said. "I looked it up. 3 years after discovery." He paused. "You looked it up." "A long time ago." She pressed her hands together. "I looked it up, and then I decided I didn't have the money or the evidence or the energy to fight something that powerful. You have the evidence now. You found the evidence. It's your evidence." He said it without flourish. "I found it, but it belongs to your story, not mine." She looked at the window, at the gray December sky, at the buildings across the skyline with their lit windows, same as she'd looked at them from her own office on the 15th floor, same as she'd been looking at this city for 8 years and trying not to want anything from it. If we pursue this, she said carefully, it becomes public. Everything becomes public. Yes. The photographs. My name connected to it. The Ashford family. Yes. That's the thing they're afraid of, she said, half to herself. They've been managing it quietly for 8 years. They don't want it public. Which is exactly why it should be. She turned back to him. I need time to think about this, she said. Take it. He looked at her, and there was something in his face that was not quite frustration and not quite urgency, but sat between the two. I just want you to know, whatever you decide, I'm not going to quietly make this go away. If you tell me to stop, I'll stop. But I won't do nothing. She held his gaze. Why not? She asked. Practically speaking, it's cleaner for you to... Olivia. His voice was steady. Don't reduce this to something practical. The room was quiet. She looked at him. Really looked, in the way she'd been carefully not doing for weeks, because looking meant acknowledging what was there. He was tired, she could see that. He'd been carrying this since the first email, investigating and building a case and carrying it without telling her until he had something solid, because he'd known she wouldn't want to be protected from something thin. He'd given her something solid. Give me 3 days, she said. You have all the time you need. She left his office and took the elevator down alone, and stood in it with her back against the wall and let herself feel, for the duration of the ride, the full weight of what she was holding. 8 years. A destroyed engagement. A career she'd built from scratch in someone else's shadow. An apartment with no art on the walls and a face-down photograph and a 12-meal rotation and the careful, constant, exhausting work of being nobody. She had done all of that because someone was afraid of what she might see if she got too close to the wrong spreadsheet. That cold anger, the quiet kind, moved through her in the elevator. She let it. The 3 days were not peaceful. She slept badly, ate badly, worked with a kind of feverish focus that was less productivity and more displacement. The restructuring analysis grew to 90 pages because she kept thinking of things to add, which she knew was avoidance but couldn't stop. She called her sister on the second night. She hadn't spoken to her sister, whose name was Claire, in 2 years. Their relationship had followed the same trajectory as the one with her mother. Careful and maintained and honoring the shape of a relationship without filling it with anything real. Claire lived in Cincinnati with a husband and 2 kids, and a life that Olivia had made herself genuinely happy for her sister to have, even when the distance between that life and her own felt like a physical thing. Hey, Claire said, picking up with the slight wary energy of someone who doesn't know the shape of an unexpected call. Hey, Olivia said. A pause. Everything okay? I need to ask you something. She sat on her couch, legs crossed, looking at the bookshelf. When it happened, back then, did you believe them? The silence was long enough to be its own answer, but Claire said, Olivia, I'm not asking to accuse you of anything. I genuinely want to know. I need to understand what everyone was thinking. Another silence. Then, with the specific difficulty of someone telling a truth they've been sitting on for a long time. I didn't believe it completely, but I didn't know what to think. You were different that last year, distant. And the photos they were fabricated, Olivia said, professionally. I have proof now. The silence this time was different. Oh, God, Claire said quietly. Yeah. Olivia, I know. We didn't... Her sister stopped. I didn't fight for you, any of us. We let you disappear. Yes, she said it without cruelty. I know you did. I'm sorry. Claire's voice was rough. That's completely inadequate. I'm sorry anyway. Olivia pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum, where the feeling was living. I believe you, she said. They talked for 1 hour and 40 minutes, the longest conversation they'd had in years. Olivia told her about the evidence and the consulting firm and the Ashford family connection. She told her about the promotion and the board presentation and the hand-drawn program. She did not talk about Nathan directly. Some things were still too new and tender to name out loud to someone she was rebuilding trust with, but she talked. She let herself be known, a little, by someone who'd known her before. When she hung up, her face was wet in a way she hadn't noticed while it was happening. She wiped it with her sleeve and sat in the dark apartment for a while. Then she texted Nathan. I want to pursue it, all of it. I'll need a lawyer recommendation. He replied in 2 minutes. I'll have a name on your desk by morning. You don't have to do anything before you're ready. She looked at that for a long time. The next morning, she came to her office and found a handwritten note on her desk. Paula's handwriting, which was extremely good, writing someone else's words. Attorney, Margaret Chen, Harmon and Associates. She knows the details. She's expecting your call. Below that, in different handwriting, less formal, slightly rushed, the handwriting of someone who wrote notes the way they talked. You're not doing this alone. N. She folded the note, put it in her desk drawer. She called Margaret Chen. The conversation lasted 55 minutes, and by the end of it, Olivia understood two things clearly. The legal case was solid, and making it would be loud. Margaret used the word loud herself, without apology. This will be loud, Miss Bennett. The Ashford name generates attention. You should be prepared for it. I know, Olivia said. You're prepared? She thought about the girl in the photograph, the one in the borrowed blue dress at some event she couldn't even remember anymore. She thought about 8 years in a gray cubicle, making herself small. She thought about Emma's face in the auditorium, that flash of pure delight before the professional tree focus reasserted itself. I'm getting there, she said. She emailed Nathan after the call. Margaret was thorough. I'm going forward. She estimates 6 to 8 weeks before filing, pending document review. His response came back in under a minute. Let me know if you need anything. Then a minute after that, Emma wants to know if you're coming to her school's holiday cookie event on Friday. I told her you're busy. She would like to formally dispute that assessment. Olivia stared at that. She typed back. Tell her the dispute is noted and accepted. What time Friday? Then she put her phone down and turned back to her screen. Outside, the December sun was doing its minimal best against the Chicago gray, producing a quality of light that was thin and cold, and also, in its specific winter way, clear. The kind of clear that came from stripped trees and low sun and the absence of anything soft in the air, where everything that was there you could see exactly. No distortion, no flattering haze. She had been hiding for 8 years in weather that felt like this, and had somehow managed to convince herself she didn't mind the cold. She was starting to remember what it felt like to be warm. The Friday cookie event was in Emma's classroom, which was decorated with the enthusiasm of 21 first graders who had been given paper snowflakes and total creative freedom. Olivia arrived to find Emma stationed at a table near the window, surrounded by sprinkle containers, with the authority of someone who had been given jurisdiction over an important resource and intended to exercise it. You came, Emma said. I said I would. Last time you said that too, Emma said, transferring sprinkles onto a star-shaped cookie with the focus of a civil engineer. I'm keeping track. I'm glad, Olivia said. That seems like useful data. Emma handed her the cookie. You put them on. Olivia put on the sprinkles, following Emma's exacting instructions. Not too many, and don't mix the colors because the blue ones are for stars only. And found herself in a first-grade classroom at 3:15 on a Friday afternoon, surrounded by children and construction paper snowflakes and the smell of sugar, and felt, in a way that was almost embarrassing in its simplicity, completely present, not monitoring the exits, not rehearsing an excuse to leave, not calculating how visible she was or who might be looking, just there. Nathan was across the room talking to another parent, and she was aware of him the way she was always aware of him now, not anxiously, just as a fact of the space. And at some point he caught her eye over the chaos of the cookie table, and the expression on his face was the soft, complicated one she'd been trying not to look at directly for weeks. She looked at it. She let herself look. He looked back and neither of them said anything, because they were in a room full of 6-year-olds with sprinkles, and also because some things don't need words yet to be real. Emma pushed a second cookie into Olivia's hand. This one is for my dad. Can you bring it to him? It has a lot of sprinkles because he's been stressed. Olivia looked at the cookie, which did in fact have an exceptional quantity of blue sprinkles. How do you know he's been stressed? She asked. Emma looked at her with the expression she'd come to recognize as Emma's "this is obvious" face. He's my dad, Emma said. I know. Olivia walked across the room with the cookie. Nathan looked at it, then at her. Emma says you've been stressed, Olivia said. She wanted you to have this. It has a lot of blue sprinkles because apparently that helps. He took the cookie. He looked at it for a second. She's been watching me too closely, he said. She watches everything. You know that. Yeah. He broke a piece off the cookie, ate it, looked at the window. The legal thing. My attorney called Margaret to coordinate. It's moving fast. Is that a problem? No. He looked at her. It's right. It's just, I want to make sure you're ready. Not for the filing, but for what comes after it. The noise. Loud, she said. Margaret used the word loud. She's not wrong. I know. She looked at her own cookie. Green tree, no tiara, more restrained than the stars she'd decorated. I've been invisible for 8 years. Nathan, I think I can handle loud. He was looking at her in that way again. I think you can too, he said. I've thought that for a while. Emma appeared between them, tugging Olivia's sleeve. Do you want to see my cubby? I have a picture of my mom in it, and my Legos. The sentence arrived the way Emma's most significant sentences arrived. Without ceremony, slipped in between normal things, carrying 10 times its apparent weight. Olivia looked at Nathan, a quick involuntary check. His face was open, not tense. He'd clearly heard and was watching to see how she responded. Yes, Olivia said to Emma. I'd like that. The cubby was in the hallway outside the classroom. A small square wooden compartment with Emma's name written on a label in marker, decorated with a sticker of a cat that appeared to have been applied with some determination. Inside, a small drawstring bag, a library book, a single Lego piece that appeared to be a wheel, and a small framed photograph. A woman with Emma's eyes and a brighter version of Emma's wide smile, sitting in a garden somewhere, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. That's my mom, Emma said. She died when I was little. I don't remember her, but my dad tells me about her, and he says she was really funny and liked dogs and was bad at cooking but tried anyway. Olivia crouched down to Emma's level, looking at the photograph. She looks like someone who laughed a lot, she said. That's what my dad says, too. Emma looked at the picture with the matter-of-fact tenderness of a child who has made peace with something by making it ordinary. My dad gets sad sometimes about her, but he's better now than he used to be. He's different. Different how? Emma considered, pulling the familiar strand of hair. He smiles more. At home. She looked at Olivia with the direct assessment. Since you came to my shoe. The shoelace moment. 4 months ago, in a company event room, Olivia crouching on the floor of a place she'd only gone to because Greg's email had enough passive aggression in it to make refusal complicated. Emma, she said carefully. I'm not saying it in a weird way, Emma said, with the dignity of a 6-year-old clarifying her position. I'm just saying what I noticed. Olivia sat with that. She looked at the photograph of the woman with Emma's eyes. She thought about Nathan saying he's different in the same tone that Emma had used. The same genetic tendency toward accurate, uncomplicated observation. She thought about what it meant to be someone who made a difference that a 6-year-old could track. Your mom sounds like she was a good person, Olivia said. She was, Emma said simply. I'm going to be like her when I'm big, except better at cooking. Olivia smiled. That's a good plan. Emma took her hand to walk back to the classroom. Ushas. Which was simply what Emma did when she'd decided the conversation was complete and the next activity required both of them, and Olivia let herself be led without analyzing it or managing it or deciding what it meant. Some things didn't need decisions yet. They just needed to be allowed to exist. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in the second week of January, which was the most anticlimactic time for a life-altering piece of mail to appear. Olivia was eating cereal at her kitchen counter. It was 7:15 in the morning, and she'd already been awake for 2 hours, working on the Q1 projections, when the email from Paula came through with the subject line, Coal Capital Annual Gala, attendance confirmation needed. She read it once, set her phone down, finished her cereal, and then picked up the phone and read it again. The gala was a formal annual event, Paula's email explained, held at the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown on the last Saturday of January. It was equal parts client event and industry showcase. The kind of evening where deals happened in hallways and careers pivoted in the space of a conversation. Senior leadership was expected to attend. Directors were strongly encouraged. Olivia was a director now. She was strongly encouraged. She typed back to Paula, confirmed, thank you. She hit send before she could think too hard about it. Then she sat with the cereal bowl and the January dark outside her window and felt the specific quality of dread that came with having made a decision before your fear had time to talk you out of it. A formal event. A hotel ballroom. Hundreds of people in an industry that now knew her name on board presentations and internal newsletters. Her name that was also, as of 3 weeks ago, attached to a civil lawsuit filing against a prominent Chicago family, which Margaret Chen had submitted on December 28th with the precision and complete absence of theatrical timing that characterized everything Margaret did. The filing had been quiet so far. Margaret had predicted a 2 to 3 week window before it hit the financial press, because documents of this nature had a way of moving through certain circles before they became public, and the Ashford family's attorneys would be making their own calculations in that window about how to respond. They have 3 options, Margaret had told her. In the frank and slightly clinical way Margaret delivered all information. Settle quietly, which is probably their preference. Fight it publicly, which is their worst option, and they know it. Or find some way to pressure you into withdrawing, which is what I'd expect them to try first. Pressure how? Olivia had said. Reputational, professional, personal, if they think they can. Margaret had looked at her over reading glasses that she wore at the end of her nose like a professor. They've done it before. They're reasonably good at it. I know, Olivia had said. I have first-hand experience. Margaret had looked at her for a moment. Yes, she'd said. You do. That's also why you're going to win. Olivia had not asked her to elaborate on that. She'd filed it away and taken the bus home and sat in her apartment and thought about the word win and what it would actually mean for the specific shape of her life, not in the abstract, but concretely, day by day, what it would feel like to have the thing that was done to her acknowledged in a public document as the thing it was. She was still working out the answer. The Thursday before the gala, she went upstairs for their regular meeting and found Nathan already in his chair, suit jacket off, tie loosened in the way it got when the day had been long, and it wasn't over. He looked up when she came in, and something in his expression said, he was glad she was there, which was a thing she'd gotten more comfortable receiving over the weeks without immediately deflecting. They worked for an hour. It was a good hour, the kind where the thinking moved fast and neither of them had to work to follow the other, where the conversation had the quality of 2 people who'd figured out each other's syntax. She'd built a cash flow model for the Q2 projections that had a structural elegance she was privately pleased with, and when she walked him through it, he caught the nuance she'd built into the sensitivity analysis without her having to explain it, which was the kind of thing that still surprised her a little, the comprehension arriving that fast. When they finished, he closed his laptop and said, Are you nervous about Saturday? She considered giving him the automatic answer. Yes, she said instead. Okay. He nodded, like this was the right answer. What specifically? Being in a room with that many people who know my name now. She turned her own pen over in her hand, a habit she'd developed in these meetings. Something to do with her hands, while she said honest things. The filing is out there. Even if the press hasn't picked it up yet, the people in that room will know. Someone will have told someone. They will, he agreed. That's accurate. So I'll be walking into a room where people will be looking at me and knowing both things simultaneously. The director, the lawsuit. Yes. That's a lot to hold. It is. He looked at her directly, the way he always looked at her. No softening, no managed distance. Do you want to skip it? No. You're a director. Attendance is... I know what attendance is. I said no. I don't want to skip it. She set the pen down. I spent 8 years skipping everything. I'm done with that approach. He was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. I just needed to say it out loud, she said, that I'm nervous, that it's going to be hard. I needed to say that to someone and have them not immediately tell me it'll be fine. It might not be fine, he said. Correct. Thank you. It'll probably be mostly fine with some portions that aren't. That's more accurate. He smiled, just slightly. I'll be there, for what that's worth. She picked up her pen again. It's worth something, she said. She meant it as a professional acknowledgement. Your presence will be professionally useful. Except that it didn't quite land that way, and they both knew it, and neither of them addressed it, which was the arrangement they'd been in since at least December and possibly longer. The arrangement was comfortable and also quietly impossible, and she didn't know how much longer it could sustain itself, but she was not dealing with that tonight. I have nothing to wear, she said, because it was true, and also because it moved the conversation somewhere practical. He blinked. Sorry? For the gala. I've spent 8 years deliberately buying unremarkable clothes. She looked at him. I don't own anything appropriate for a formal event at the Grand Meridian. A pause. I could have Paula. Absolutely not. The idea of Nathan's executive assistant selecting her wardrobe was the specific kind of help she couldn't accept. I'll figure it out. I'm just noting it as a logistical reality. She figured it out by calling Claire, which she would not have done 2 months ago. Claire, who lived in Cincinnati but had maintained an inexplicable detailed knowledge of Chicago shopping geography, spent 45 minutes on the phone with her that Wednesday evening, making specific recommendations with the focus of someone who had been waiting for years to be allowed to do this and wasn't going to waste the opportunity. Not black, Claire said. Everyone in finance wears black to these things. You want to be memorable, but not aggressive. Navy, deep green, burgundy. I was thinking navy, Olivia said. Good. There's a place on Michigan Avenue called Harrow. Ask for the evening section, second floor. Tell them it's a financial industry gala. They'll know the dress code. You know this off the top of your head. I have a friend who covers Chicago fashion for a magazine and tells me everything. Go Thursday, not Saturday. Saturday, it'll be picked over. She went Thursday after work. The store was quieter than she'd expected, and the woman who helped her, mid-50s, with the unhurried manner of someone who had dressed a great many people for events they were nervous about, did not make her feel observed or judged, which Olivia had been braced for. The dress she ended up with was navy, as predicted, a deep, serious blue that had some quality to it she couldn't articulate except that it felt like herself, or some version of herself she was in the process of becoming. Fitted through the body but not restrictive, with a neckline that was appropriate and also undeniably not invisible. Heels she could actually walk in. Her hair, which she hadn't cut in 2 years and was growing past her shoulders now, she'd decided to wear down. She looked at herself in the store mirror and felt the strangeness of looking like someone who meant to be seen. She bought the dress. She took the bus home. She hung it on the back of her closet door where she could see it from her bed. Saturday arrived the way Chicago January. Saturdays arrived gray and cold and certain, the kind of weather that didn't apologize for itself. She spent the day working, which was what she did with most Saturdays now, except that around 4 o'clock, she stopped and got ready with the deliberate focus of someone completing a task that required proper attention. The shower. The hair, down and dried with more care than usual. The small amount of makeup she owned, applied with the memory of how she'd used to do it before, when she'd been someone who did this without thinking. The dress. The heels. She looked in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. The woman in the mirror was 30 years old and tired in ways that showed around the eyes, and her hair wasn't quite right on the left side, and the heels were slightly higher than comfortable. She was not the polished, frictionless version of herself that she would have constructed at 22. She looked like someone who had been somewhere hard and had come back from it without pretending it hadn't happened. She looked, she thought, like someone real. She took a cab to the Grand Meridian because the bus wasn't right for this, and she knew it, and she watched the city move past through the cab window and kept her hands folded in her lap and did not let herself rehearse exits. The hotel entrance was already active when she arrived. Black cars, dressed guests, the warm light of a lobby that had been designed to impress and mostly succeeded. She walked through the revolving door into the heat of the interior, checked her coat, and stood for a moment in the carpeted entry to the ballroom level, letting herself adjust. She could do this. She had given a board presentation to 17 people who weren't interested in being impressed. She had filed a lawsuit against a family with more money than most municipalities. She had eaten lunch in the break room every day for 3 months after years of desk hiding, and the world had not ended. She could walk into a ballroom. She walked in. The room was large. She'd known it would be, but knowing and experiencing were different, and for 1 second she stood at the entrance and felt the scale of it. The round tables with their white linens, the bar at the far end, the stage setup where someone would presumably say things into a microphone later, the 150 or 200 people already in various states of conversation and drink. The level of noise that came with that many people in a space with high ceilings. She found Paula first because Paula was easy to locate in any room. She had a navigational quality that meant she was always exactly where she was supposed to be. Paula was near the bar, holding a tablet, and when she saw Olivia, she gave her a look that was professional appreciation delivered efficiently. "You look excellent," Paula said. "Nathan is talking to the Renfield group people in the far corner. He's been checking the door since 8:30. It's 9. "Yes," Paula said without further comment. Olivia got a glass of sparkling water. She didn't drink at professional events, hadn't since she was 22, and this was a rule she had no intention of revising, and made her way through the room. She recognized faces from board meetings and presentations. She recognized names from documents. A few people caught her eye, and she held the eye contact, which was something she'd been practicing with the deliberate effort of someone relearning a skill their muscles had forgotten. A woman from one of the firm's institutional clients stopped her near the center of the room. Olivia Bennett, right? The Q3 restructuring was yours? It was. I thought so. The woman had a direct, appraising quality. There was a structural approach to the third sector analysis that I haven't seen anyone do before. I wanted to tell you that. Olivia held the compliment without deflecting it, which took active effort. Thank you, she said. I'm glad it was useful. She kept moving. She found Nathan in the far corner, as Paula had said, in conversation with two men in the specific mode of a business conversation that was almost over. The slight shifting of weight, the checking of drinks, the subconscious gathering for exit. He saw her when she was still 10 feet away. He went still for a moment, not dramatically. It was small, a brief interruption in his normal quality of self-possession. Then he said something to the two men, wrapped up the conversation with the smooth efficiency of someone who had somewhere else to be, and turned toward her. He looked at her, and she let him look, which was new. She didn't find a reason to glance away or adjust something or create the distance she'd been manufacturing for months. Hi, he said. Hi. He looked like he was going to say something else, and then didn't, which was unlike him. He was, she realized, slightly less composed than usual, and she found this in the least convenient way possible, both visible and disarming. You look... He stopped, started again. Different. It's the same face. I know. He said it quietly. Different, though. She understood what he meant. She looked like herself. The self she'd been before, or something past that. Something she was still becoming. It was visible, and that was the point, and she understood what it meant to have the specific person beside her right now be the one to notice. Paula says you've been checking the door since 8:30, she said. Paula talks too much. Paula is extremely efficient. Those are different things. The slight smile. She knew the taxonomy of his expressions now. This was the one that meant she'd gotten him, and he knew it. They moved through the room together, which happened naturally and without announcement. He introduced her to people. Olivia Bennett, Director of Financial Analysis. And she talked and held her ground, and found that the anticipatory dread she'd carried all week was different from the actual experience, because she was here in her body doing the thing rather than imagining it, and her body knew what to do even when her mind was managing the noise. She was standing near the east side of the ballroom, halfway through a conversation with a portfolio manager from a firm she'd worked with on the Q2 restructuring when she saw him. She recognized him the way you recognize something you've been unconsciously watching for, not with surprise, but with a kind of grim completion, like a weather system you'd been tracking arriving on schedule. Daniel Ashford. I was 34 now. 2 years older than she'd last seen him, at the removal of a ring she'd never asked for the return of. He was still handsome in the way he'd always been, the well-maintained handsomeness of a man who had always had access to the things that preserved it. He was in a group of three, talking, drink in hand, and he was watching her, not glancing, watching. She finished her sentence to the portfolio manager. She excused herself with the specific calm of someone who has decided how they are going to handle something before the something has fully arrived. She set her glass on a passing waiter's tray. Her heart was beating fast, which was information she noted and set aside. Nathan appeared at her left elbow. She didn't know if he'd seen or if his presence was coincidental, but he was there, and she was aware of it without making it load-bearing. You okay? He said, quietly. Give me a minute, she said. She had never, in 8 years, figured out what she would say to Daniel Ashford if she saw him again. She had rehearsed and discarded 100 versions, angry, cold, forgiving, withering, and had eventually stopped rehearsing because she'd stopped believing she would ever have to use any of them. She had disappeared well enough. He had never looked. Except now she was not disappeared. Now her name was on board presentations, and in a civil filing that named his family's financial vehicle, and she was standing in the Grand Meridian Hotel in a navy dress and her hair down, and Daniel Ashford was walking toward her with the expression of a man who has been practicing his approach. He stopped 2 feet away. Olivia. His voice had the careful quality of someone who had also been rehearsing. I didn't expect to see you here. This is a financial industry event, she said. I work in finance. It's not that surprising. A beat. No, He looked at her with something that might have been genuine discomfort, or might have been the performance of it. She found, to her own surprise, that she wasn't sure which it was, and also that it mattered much less than she'd thought it would. I heard about the filing. I know you did. Olivia, I didn't. He stopped. His jaw moved. I didn't know what my father did. Not until recently. Not the extent of it. She looked at him. He had Daniel's father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and no version of the face she'd been engaged to 8 years ago looked quite right to her now. Not because she was bitter, but because she was different enough that he'd become someone she used to know, rather than someone she felt anything sharp about. I don't know if that's true, she said. I'm not sure I need to know. I want to... He moved slightly forward, closing the distance by a few inches, and his hand came up. She wasn't sure of his intention, possibly her arm, possibly just a gesture, and her entire body went rigid in a way that had nothing to do with choice. His hand closed around her wrist, not hard, not violent, but contact and uninvited, and the full weight of 8 years of everything this man represented moved through her in the 3 seconds that passed between the touch and what happened next. Nathan stepped between them. I didn't shove, didn't raise his voice. He simply moved, one step, deliberate, placing himself in the space. Daniel's hand was trying to occupy, and the motion had a quietness to it that was somehow more absolute than noise would have been. Daniel's hand fell away. The 3 or 4 feet of cleared space around them registered in the ballroom, the way cleared space in a crowded room always registered. Other conversations pausing, attention redirecting. The room becoming briefly aware of something happening in its east corner. Nathan looked at Daniel with the expression she'd seen him use on people who were wasting his time. Not aggressive, not theatrical, just flat and entirely certain. I don't think she invited that, he said. His voice was level. The kind of level that doesn't need volume. Daniel looked at him, then at Olivia, then back. Something moved through his expression, the recalibration of a man who had miscalculated the situation he was walking into. We were just talking, Daniel said. I know what you were doing, Olivia said, and her voice surprised her, steady and direct, coming from somewhere below the fear. You were trying to manage me, same as you always did. Say enough to make me doubt the filing. Make it look like a conversation between 2 people with history. See if I'm still the same person who was too ashamed to fight back. The ballroom's nearby conversations had not resumed. Daniel's expression shifted into something that was harder to read. Defensiveness, or embarrassment, or genuine discomfort, some combination she no longer had the patience to sort through. Olivia, I'm not, she said, the same person. I want to be clear about that. The lawsuit is proceeding. She held his gaze without effort, which was the thing that surprised her most, how little effort it took. Your family's attorneys can contact Margaret Chen. I have nothing to say to you directly about it. My father made mistakes. Your father destroyed 8 years of my life to protect a real estate valuation. The cold anger was in her voice, clean and controlled, not hot. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, and it's being accounted for. Silence. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Whatever he'd prepared for this conversation, it hadn't been this version of her. Not the composure, not the specificity. He looked like a man encountering something he couldn't locate in his existing map. I'm sorry, he said, finally. And she couldn't tell if he meant it, and she found again that it mattered less than she'd spent years assuming it would. Okay, she said. Not, I forgive you. Not, it's fine, just, okay. The word that acknowledged receipt without assigning weight. He held her gaze for another second, then looked at Nathan, then turned and walked away, back through the crowd that parted for him with the ease of someone who had always had rooms part for him. The sound of the ballroom returned to its full volume all at once, like a held breath released. Nathan turned to look at her. She was aware that she was shaking slightly, not visibly, just in her hands, the fine tremor of something processed at high speed, adrenaline finding its outlet. Are you all right? He asked. Yes. She meant it. I need 30 seconds. He gave her the 30 seconds. He stood beside her in the resumed noise of the room and didn't try to fill the space or move them somewhere, or manage how it looked from the outside. He just stood there, which was the right thing, and she knew it. After 30 seconds, she said, Okay. Okay? I'm okay. She picked up a new glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. Her hands were steady now. That went better than I expected. You were... He stopped, and then, carefully, You were extraordinary. She looked at him. I mean it, he said. Not the right thing to say version. I mean it. She believed him. That was the thing about Nathan Cole. She'd tested his words against his actions for 4 months now, and they matched in a way she'd stopped being suspicious of somewhere around week 6. He touched her wrist, Paula said, appearing beside them with the timing of someone who had been watching carefully and had decided the aftermath was her moment. I saw that from across the room, for the record. Thank you, Paula, Nathan said. I'm just noting that I'm a witness if that's relevant to the legal matter. I'll tell Margaret, Olivia said. Paula nodded once and evaporated back into the room. They moved away from the east corner toward the windows where the Chicago January pressed its dark cold against the glass. The city was lit below them, the particular nighttime grid of it, gold and white, and the red drift of traffic. She stood at the window for a moment and let herself feel the height of it, the view, the distance from the gray 14th floor cubicle that now felt like something that had happened to a different version of her. Not a different person. The same person, but thinner, compacted into a smaller space than she was supposed to fit. I've been thinking, Nathan said beside her, his voice quiet enough that it was only for her, about how to say something, for about 3 months. She looked at the city. 3 months is a long time to think, she said. I'm aware. He looked at the window, then at her. I'm usually better at this, in the sense that I'm usually better at knowing what I want and acting on it directly. I know, I've watched you operate for 4 months. Right. He turned slightly toward her. This is different. She turned too. He looked tired in a specific way. Not professionally tired, but personally tired. The tiredness of someone who has been patient about something for a long time and is running out of reasons to stay patient. She recognized it because she felt it in herself, had been feeling it for weeks. The strain of maintaining careful distance from something she'd already moved past maintaining distance from. Nathan, she said, I know the timing is... I know what you're going to say. Do you? I've known for about 6 weeks, she said. Maybe longer. She stopped. I've been trying to figure out if I was ready for something real after... She gestured vaguely, which was the only gesture that covered 8 years adequately. He waited. I don't know if I'm ready, she said, honestly. I don't know if I'm going to be ready in some clean, defined way that I can point to and say, yes, now. I don't think it works like that. Okay, he said. But I know that... She stopped again because she was trying to say something true, and true things required the right words. I know that you are the first person in 8 years that I've been afraid to lose. That's a thing I know. The city hummed below them. The ballroom noise was behind them, and the January dark was in front of them, and Nathan Cole was very still in the specific way he went still when something mattered. That's enough, he said, quietly. That's enough? More than enough. He looked at her, and there was no performance in it, no managed presentation of feeling, just the expression she'd been cataloging for months, the one that kept adding new rooms to itself. I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. I'm just asking if you're here. She thought about what here meant. Not in this ballroom, not in this city, not in this career she'd rebuilt from the ground up. Whether she was present in her own life, in her own skin, in the specific warmth of 2 people who had spent 4 months carefully learning each other's weight. Yes, she said. I'm here. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't move closer in any cinematic way. He just exhaled, actually exhaled, a long, quiet breath, like something he'd been holding had released. Okay, he said. That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say? I don't know, something more significant. I think okay is significant, he said. Okay means we actually start, which is different from anything we've been doing. She considered this. You're right, she said. I know. Don't be smug about it. I'm not being smug. I'm being accurate. Those are not always different things with you. He laughed. The real one. The surprised one. The one she'd been deliberately trying to produce for months and had gotten better at. And it moved through the ballroom noise and the January dark and landed somewhere warm. They stayed at the window for a while. Eventually, Paula came to find them with the information that the dinner service was starting and there were table assignments, and they moved back into the room and sat with colleagues and clients and talked about the things you talked about at these events. And the evening continued in the way evenings continue after something real has happened inside them. The external script proceeding while the interior thing settles into place. She got home at midnight. She hung the navy dress in her closet. She put the heels by the door. She made tea she didn't drink and sat on her couch in the January quiet of her apartment and went over the evening with the systematic review she applied to most significant things. Daniel's hand on her wrist. The 30 seconds after. Nathan's voice, flat and certain. I don't think she invited that. Her own voice, which had surprised her by arriving without trembling. I'm not the same person. She hadn't been performing. That was the thing she kept returning to. She hadn't been performing bravery or composure or the version of herself she wanted people to see. She'd just been there, present, and tired of pretending, and saying the actual thing. It had not destroyed anything. The world had not ended. She thought about Emma, who was presumably asleep right now in the Cole apartment with its six-legged cat drawings and its tiara-wearing first-grade projects, and who had looked at Olivia's face in a school auditorium and correctly identified something shifting before Olivia had admitted it to herself. She thought about the friendship bracelet on her wrist, which she'd worn under the sleeve of the navy dress all evening, visible only to her. She thought about Nathan's voice saying okay like it was the start of something rather than the end. Her phone buzzed on the cushion beside her. She picked it up. It was a text from Nathan. Emma woke up and asked if the gala was good. I told her yes. She wants a full report tomorrow. I warned her that might require your participation. She was smiling before she finished reading it. She typed back, tell her I'm available for debriefing, but I'm not eating cereal at 9 in the morning for anyone. The reply came back in 30 seconds. She says 9:30 and she'll make the cereal herself. She also says she needs to know what you wore. Tell her navy. She says she needs more detail than that. Olivia looked at the ceiling of her apartment, at the water stain in the far corner she'd been meaning to ask Victor about for 2 years, at the light she'd left on in the kitchen, at the life she lived in this small space that was finally starting to feel like it belonged to someone who intended to stay. She typed, tell her I looked like someone who meant to be seen. She sent it before she second-guessed herself because that was the new arrangement. Say the thing. Don't manage it. Let it land where it lands. The reply from Nathan took slightly longer this time. When it came, it was brief. She says, good. Olivia set the phone down. She looked at the friendship bracelet on her wrist. She looked at the photograph on her desk, still face up, where she'd left it. The girl in the borrowed blue dress at some party. Neither of them could remember anymore. She looked at it for a while. Then she turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't spend the dark hours braced for what was coming. She just slept. The settlement offer came on a Wednesday morning in late February, which was appropriately anticlimactic for something Olivia had spent 8 years waiting to happen. Margaret Chen called at 8:47 before Olivia had finished her first cup of tea and delivered the news with the same even tone she used to deliver all news, the same voice for good and bad, because Margaret had decided long ago that emotional coloring was not her job. Whitmore Capital's attorneys submitted a formal settlement proposal this morning, Margaret said. The number is significant, more than we initially projected. Olivia sat down on her couch. How significant, she said. Margaret told her. She sat with the number for a moment, not with excitement exactly, but with a feeling she didn't have a clean word for, something that was part vindication and part grief and part the exhausted relief of a person who has been carrying something heavy for so long that when it's finally set down, the absence of the weight feels almost disorienting. There are conditions, Margaret continued, standard NDA provisions. They want the filing sealed, your statements removed from public record, no press engagement. No, Olivia said. A brief pause. I'd recommend you think about Margaret. She kept her voice level. I didn't file this to get a check and go away. If they want to settle, the terms are the settlement is public record, the acknowledgement of liability is on the document, and no NDA. They won't like that, I know. It may reduce the final number. I understand. A longer pause. All right, Margaret said. I'll communicate your position. Thank you. She hung up and sat with her tea gone cold and looked at the February morning outside her window. Gray, the way Chicago. February mornings always were, the city locked in the last stretch of winter with the particular endurance of a place that had learned not to expect mercy from the season. She texted Nathan. Settlement offer came in. I turned down the NDA. His reply arrived in 2 minutes. Good. Then, are you okay? She thought about it honestly, the way she'd been practicing. Getting there, she typed. Come to my office at lunch? Already planning to. She went to work. The weeks between the gala and the settlement offer had been the strangest of her adult life. Not dramatically strange, but quietly, fundamentally altered in ways she kept noticing sideways. The way you notice a change in light rather than looking directly at it. She and Nathan had not announced anything, had not made declarations, had not done the thing where two people who have acknowledged something real immediately perform the acknowledgement for an audience. What had changed was subtler and more durable than performance, a shift in the quality of ordinary time. He called her now, sometimes, in the evenings. Not always about work. She called him back. They talked about Emma's latest engineering venture, which had graduated from Lego vehicles to an ambitious cardboard and rubber band catapult that had successfully launched a grape across the kitchen and shattered a small decorative plate, an incident Nathan reported with the careful tone of a man who had laughed alone in his home office for 3 minutes before addressing the structural damage. She went to the Cole apartment for the first time on a Sunday in early February. She told herself it was casual. Emma had asked, through Nathan, whether Olivia wanted to see the catapult before it was disassembled on safety grounds, and she'd said yes without thinking about it too much. The apartment was on the 43rd floor of a building in the Gold Coast, which she'd known in the abstract and which felt different from the inside, large and warm and lived in the specific way that spaces get when a child has claimed them, which was to say there were things everywhere. A half-built structure on the coffee table, a blanket fort situation in the corner that had clearly been there long enough to become semi-permanent, a child's artwork on the refrigerator and the hallway wall, and one piece, framed, in the living room that Olivia recognized as a newer version of the six-legged cat. Emma had given her a full tour with the pride of a property owner, explaining the history and function of each room with the confidence of a docent who had decided her audience was intelligent enough for the full version. This is the kitchen, Emma had said. My dad burns pasta. I'm not allowed to use the stove, but I'm learning to make sandwiches. This is the living room. That's my fort. You can go in, but you have to ask first. This is my room. Emma's room was purple, with a loft bed and a bookshelf overflowing with picture books and early readers, and 3 books that were clearly too old for her, but which Emma had apparently acquired through a determination that outpaced developmental recommendation. On the desk, the catapult. Beside it, a notebook filled with what appeared to be engineering diagrams, labeled in Emma's careful printing with measurements and arrows. You drew blueprints, Olivia said. You have to plan first, Emma said, with the gravity of someone who had learned this the hard way. I didn't plan the first time and Marcus got hit with a cracker. How is Marcus? He's fine. He thought it was cool after. Nathan had made dinner, which was not burned pasta. He had apparently decided that pasta was a liability and made something with chicken and roasted vegetables that was good in the unpretentious way of food made by someone who had learned to cook out of necessity rather than ambition. The 3 of them ate at the kitchen table with the easy noise of Emma describing her week in the comprehensive manner she applied to all reporting, and somewhere between Emma's account of the art project that had gone wrong and Nathan's attempt to explain to a 6-year-old why certain types of grape launches were a public safety concern, Olivia had realized she was not monitoring anything, not the exits, not the conversation's emotional temperature, not the specific balance of how much of herself she was showing versus protecting. She was just at a table, eating dinner, listening to a child explain her engineering philosophy. It was so ordinary. That was the thing that got her up. Not the grandness of it, but the ordinary. She had spent 8 years in the kind of loneliness that doesn't announce itself, the loneliness of a life narrowed to fit inside safety margins, and she hadn't let herself know how much she'd been missing the ordinary until it was in front of her and she could feel exactly the shape of the absence it was filling. She'd done the dishes after because the dinner had been Nathan's and doing the dishes felt right, and Emma had dried, which she did with more enthusiasm than precision. And Nathan had put things away, and they'd all operated in the kitchen together with the comfortable inefficiency of people learning each other's spatial habits. She'd gone home at 9:30 and sat on her bus and looked out the window with the friendship bracelet on her wrist and felt, carefully and without trusting it completely yet, something that resembled the early stages of a life that was hers. The settlement negotiation took 3 more weeks. The Ashford family attorneys pushed back on the no NDA condition with the persistence of people accustomed to getting the terms they wanted, and Margaret pushed back on their pushback with the persistence of a person who had been told what her client wanted and intended to deliver it. Olivia went to work every day and did her job and waited, which was its own particular kind of hard. The waiting, the knowing that somewhere in a conference room, lawyers were arguing about the architecture of accountability for something that had happened to her body and her name and her years. She told Claire about the offer, and Claire called her back 20 minutes later, having clearly spent those 20 minutes crying, which was the kind of overdue response that Olivia received without knowing exactly what to do with it, except to stay on the phone until it was over. "I keep thinking about you at 22, Claire said, alone in that apartment. "I wasn't completely alone," Olivia said. "I had a very reliable bus schedule." Livy: "I'm okay, Claire. I mean it. Not the way I used to say it. I know. I can tell the difference now." A pause. "I couldn't before. I want you to know I know the difference now." "That's worth something," Olivia said. "That you know." The final settlement terms were agreed on a Thursday. Appropriately, she thought. Her Thursdays had been changing shape for months. Margaret called at 2:15, which was when she would normally have been in Nathan's office for their standing meeting, except that Nathan had rescheduled the meeting to 4 because he'd had a board call, and she'd been at her desk working on the Q2 analysis when her phone rang. "Public record," Margaret said. "Liability acknowledged on the document. Not full criminal liability, but civil wrongdoing is explicit and named. No NDA." A pause that for Margaret was the equivalent of a dramatic beat. And the number held. Olivia pressed her hand flat against her desk. "Okay," she said. "How are you feeling?" "I'll let you know when I figure it out." "Take your time," Margaret said, which was the most human thing Margaret had said to her in 3 months of professional contact. This was right to pursue. "I want you to know I think that." "Thank you, Margaret. I'll send the documents by end of day." She hung up. She looked at her screen. The Q2 analysis was open, mid-calculation, a formula half-entered in cell G47, the cursor blinking. She saved the file. She got up from her desk and went to the window and stood there, looking at the February city, and let herself feel all of it without organizing it first. The anger and the relief and the grief and the vindication, and underneath those, quieter and more complicated, the specific feeling of a person who has been fighting for so long that winning doesn't feel like the end, just like the end of one particular fight. She was not naive enough to think this fixed things. The photographs existed, and the people who'd seen them existed, and the version of her that people had been willing to believe those photographs about, that had happened, and it didn't unhappen because a civil document said it was wrong. Her mother would still have the memory of choosing to wonder. Daniel Ashford's face would still exist in her peripheral history. The 8 years would still have been what they were, but there would be a public document now that said, this was done to her, and it was wrong, and the people who did it have been made to account for it. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, quite a lot. She turned from the window when she heard the knock on her office door. Nathan was standing in the doorway. He'd gotten through his board call early, apparently, and he'd heard from Margaret, or from Paula, who'd heard from Margaret. The information chain in this office was extremely efficient, and he was looking at her with the expression she'd stopped trying to categorize and had started just receiving. "It's done," she said. "I know." He came into the office, and she didn't move from the window, and he stopped a few feet from her in the February light. "How are you?" "I honestly don't know yet," she said. "I think I need to be somewhere that isn't the office." "Okay. Don't say we should celebrate." "I wasn't going to." "Everyone's going to say we should celebrate." "Let them." He looked at her steadily. "What do you actually want to do?" She thought about it. "I want to go for a walk," she said. "It's February and it's Chicago, and that's a terrible idea, but that's what I want." "Okay. You don't have to." "Olivia." His voice was patient. "Get your coat." They walked along the lakefront, which was genuinely inadvisable in late February. The wind off the water was the specific Chicago wind that made the rest of the country's winters seem like a misunderstanding, and the path was mostly empty because people with reasonable judgment were indoors. She had her parka on and her hands in her pockets, and the wind was making it hard to talk at full volume, which was fine. They didn't need to talk at full volume. They walked for a while in the comfortable silence she'd gotten used to, the kind that existed between two people who had spent enough time together that quiet wasn't an absence of something, just its own texture. 8 years, she said into the wind. "Yeah. I wasted 8 years." He was quiet for a moment. "Did you?" She looked at him sideways. You built something, he said. In those 8 years. The analysis framework, the methodology, that's not nothing. You built it from scratch alone without credit or recognition. Out of hiding. Yes, and it's still what it is. He walked another few steps. I'm not saying it was the life you should have had. I'm saying it wasn't empty. She thought about this. She thought about the 12-meal rotation and the bowing bookshelf and the bus routes she knew by heart, and the way she'd learned to fix her own radiator and the fact that she could read a bond portfolio faster than anyone she'd met, and that she'd done the New York Times crossword in pen every Sunday for 3 years, and that she'd made friends, small and quiet ones, with the people who cleaned the 14th floor, and with Victor the landlord, and with a woman at her bus stop whose name was Deshawn, and who always had an opinion about the weather. Not nothing, not the life she would have built, but not empty. Okay, she said, not wasted. Expensive. Yeah, he said, expensive is right. The wind came off the lake in a gust that required both of them to lean slightly into it, and he put his hand around her arm, not dramatically, just the ordinary contact of two people bracing against the same thing. And she let it stay, and they walked the rest of the path like that, into the February cold. She moved apartments in March, not because she had to. She could have stayed in Edgewater, could have upgraded within the neighborhood, the settlement money now sitting in an account she was still adjusting to the reality of. But she'd been in that apartment for 5 years, and it had been the right apartment for the person she'd been in those years, functional and invisible and organized around minimizing everything. And she was not entirely that person anymore, and the apartment knew it. She'd started to feel it in the rooms, the slight wrongness of a space that belonged to a version of you that you were leaving behind. She found a place in Lincoln Square, 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, actual art on the walls from the previous tenant that she'd negotiated into the lease price, a kitchen window that got morning light, a radiator that worked 90% of the time, which was an improvement. She painted the living room herself on a Saturday in March, with Claire helping via video call and providing commentary and a fair amount of unsolicited color opinions. Not that gray, Claire said from the phone propped against the paint tray. It's called warm linen. It looks like a waiting room. It does not look like a waiting room. Livy. It looks like the inside of an envelope. She ended up with a color called dusty sage, which was green enough to feel alive and quiet enough to feel like hers. She painted it in 3 hours and sent Claire a photo, and Claire sent back a string of approving responses that were more effusive than the color probably warranted, but which Olivia received without deflecting. She put art on the walls. An actual print she'd bought from a street market, abstract, mostly blue, the kind of thing you get because you stood in front of it for too long and had to admit it meant something to you. A photograph of the lake in the winter, which a photographer had taken and sold for $40, and which captured exactly the quality of February lakefront light she'd been walking in the day the settlement came through. The face-down photograph from her old desk she put in a frame. Not on display. She wasn't ready for that, and she thought she might never be, and that was fine. She put it in the bedside table drawer, face up inside the drawer, which was its own kind of thing. Not hidden, not displayed, just kept. Emma helped her unpack, which was to say Emma supervised the unpacking with the focused criticism of someone who had strong opinions about organizational systems and was not afraid to share them. Your books aren't in any order, Emma said, standing in front of the bowing bookshelf Olivia had transported from Edgewater. I know where everything is, Olivia said, but there's no system. The system is that I know where everything is. Emma looked deeply skeptical. My dad says that about his office, and he loses things. Your dad has 300 more books than I do. I have a system for my books, Emma said, and proceeded to explain it, alphabetical by first name of author, which was unusual, but which Emma had apparently arrived at through careful reasoning that Olivia followed and found defensible even if she didn't adopt it. Nathan had carried boxes. He'd shown up on Saturday morning with coffee and had moved furniture with the unheroic, competent efficiency of someone who had moved enough things to know that the trick was just to keep going, and he'd swapped the bookshelves twice before getting them in the configuration that worked, and had not said anything about the dusty sage walls, except to stand in the doorway when he first came in and say, simply, "That's a good color." It was almost waiting room gray, she said. What happened? Claire. I'll thank her. They ate lunch, sandwiches she'd bought from the deli on the corner, sitting on the floor because the furniture wasn't arranged yet, Emma between them cross-legged with a pickle she'd negotiated separately. Outside, the March Chicago afternoon was doing something unusual and welcome. There was actual sun. Not the thin, apologetic winter sun, but something with warmth behind it, the first hint of the season turning. "I like this apartment," Emma said, with the authority of someone issuing a ruling. "Good, I'm glad." "My room is better," Emma added. "Well, your room has a loft bed." "That's why." Emma picked at her pickle. "Can I have a wall here?" Olivia and Nathan both looked at her. "A wall?" Olivia said. "Like a wall where I can put things. When I'm here." She said it matter-of-factly, without the self-consciousness of someone who understood exactly what they were asking. She was 6, and she wanted a wall, and it seemed reasonable to her. "My drawings, and maybe a Lego hook." The room was very quiet for a moment. Olivia looked at Emma, who was eating her pickle with complete serenity. She looked at Nathan, who was looking at his daughter with an expression that contained several things at once: love and apprehension, and the particular helplessness of a parent whose child has just said something true and unmanageable. "Yeah," Olivia said. "You can have a wall." Emma nodded like this was confirmed. "The one by the window is best. It gets good light for drawings." "That's a solid assessment." "I know." Emma finished the pickle. "Can we get ice cream? It's sunny." "It's 52 degrees, Nathan said. "It's sunny," Emma repeated, as though this resolved the temperature objection, which it apparently did, because they got ice cream. The spring moved away. Chicago springs moved, in increments, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, a warm week followed by a cold snap. The trees budding cautiously on the lakefront path. The city collectively deciding at some point in April that it was done with coats and wearing lighter things, regardless of the actual temperature. Olivia's life in the spring looked, from the outside, like a life in progress. A good one, with problems and complications and the ordinary friction of things that were real. Her Thursday meetings with Nathan had evolved into something less formally defined. They still had them, still worked through strategy and analysis with the sharp, comfortable shorthand they'd developed. But the hour had expanded and contracted based on what they needed, and the agenda had become flexible enough that it sometimes included things like Emma's school sent a note about the catapult. "I need a second opinion on how to respond, and I've been thinking about the Q3 approach differently. Can I try something on you?" Margaret Chen called in April to let her know that the settlement document had been entered into public record, and that 2 financial industry publications had run brief items on it. The items were factual and relatively small: a civil settlement, an acknowledged liability, a name that had been previously unknown to those publications, but was now connected to a board-level role at Coal Capital. Not a scandal, not a sensation, just a fact, in the record, permanent. Her phone had notifications for 2 days. Most of them she didn't answer. Some of them she did. A woman who'd been at her firm when it happened, who'd seen the original photographs and had always wondered and now said so. A former college classmate. One person she didn't recognize who said simply, "I went through something similar, and I just wanted to tell you that you're brave," which was the kind of message that required sitting with. She was not sure she was brave. She thought bravery was perhaps the wrong category. Bravery implied she hadn't been afraid, and she'd been afraid continuously, in varying intensities, for most of this process. What she'd been was unwilling to let the fear continue to make her decisions for her. That was different from brave, she thought. That was just tired of the alternative. Her mother called. "I read the article," her mother said. "I know." Olivia. A long pause, the kind her mother took when she was navigating something that didn't have easy language. "I want to say, I should have been—" She stopped. "I didn't fight for you. When it happened." "No," Olivia said. "You didn't." "I'm sorry." Her mother's voice was rough. "I know that's not enough. I've known that for 8 years, and I didn't know how to come back from it." She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about Emma's face in the auditorium, the flash of pure delight. She thought about the dusty sage walls and the art, and the second bedroom with the wall by the window. She thought about what it cost to stay angry at someone who was trying, however badly and belatedly, to find their way back. She thought about what it cost not to. "I know," she said. "I know you're sorry. I'm working on what that means for us. I don't have a clean answer yet." "I'm not asking for clean," her mother said quickly. like she'd been afraid of exactly that response and was relieved to hear it was honest rather than final. I'm just asking if there's a door. Olivia looked at the sage green wall across from where she was sitting, at the blue abstract print she'd bought because she stood in front of it too long. There's a door, she said. She meant it. It was a Sunday in late May when everything felt, not resolved exactly, but present in a way she'd stopped fighting. The particular May in Chicago where the city remembered how to be warm and the lakefront path had people on it, and the trees were fully committed to their leaves, and the light in the mornings came through her kitchen window like something that had been waiting to be let in. She was making coffee, an actual coffee this time. She'd started drinking it in the spring, another small revision to the person she'd been, when her phone showed a text from Emma. Can you come over? I finished the new thing. It's important. She texted back, give me an hour. She took her time getting ready, which was something she'd started allowing herself, not because she was going somewhere significant, but because the ordinary morning deserved attention too. She put on jeans and a light jacket in a color that was neither beige nor brown. She wore her hair down. She put on the friendship bracelet, which was slightly fraying now after 5 months and which she had no intention of replacing with anything, and she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for the usual moment, 30 years old. Tired in the way she'd probably always be a little tired, because some things left marks that didn't fully fade. Her hair had grown out enough to do something with, though mostly she didn't do much with it. The glasses were different. She'd gotten new ones in March, smaller frames, which Janet from the 14th floor had noticed immediately and said made her look like herself, which Olivia had found she didn't know how to argue with. She looked like herself. That was still new enough to sit with every morning. The Cole apartment was doing what it did on Sunday mornings, which was to say it was warm and slightly chaotic and smelled like coffee and the specific wax of a certain brand of crayons Emma favored. Emma met her at the door with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting and was done waiting. Come here, Emma said, taking her hand, and led her to the living room. On the coffee table, carefully constructed from materials that included cardboard, balsa wood, rubber bands, a small battery-powered motor that appeared to have come from a toy, and what looked like the mechanism from a wind-up music box, was a device of indeterminate purpose and considerable ambition. What is it? Olivia said. It's a machine that does something, Emma said. What does it do? Emma looked at it, then at Olivia. That part I'm still figuring out, but the structure works. Watch. She turned a small handle on the side and the machine made a sequence of mechanical sounds. Gears turned, the motor hummed, and a small flag on top raised itself 3 inches and then lowered. Olivia watched the flag go up and come down. Emma, she said. I know it doesn't do much yet, Emma said, with the pragmatism of someone who has made peace with an incomplete project. But the moving parts all work together. That's the hard part. The doing something part I'll figure out after. Olivia looked at the machine. She thought about the truth of that, the moving parts working together being the hard part, the figuring out what it's for part coming after. That's actually exactly right, she said. Nathan was in the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, watching them both. He had the Sunday quality about him, the slight looseness of a man in his own home with nowhere to be, the tiredness around his eyes that wasn't distress, but just the ordinary accumulation of a week lived fully. What do you think? He asked. I think the moving parts are excellent, she said, and I think she'll figure out the doing something part. He smiled, and she smiled, and Emma was already explaining the gear mechanism to a level of detail that required full attention. Later, after Emma had gone to a birthday party for a classmate, and they had the apartment quiet in the particular way it got when Emma's specific energy vacated it, Olivia sat on the couch with her coffee, and Nathan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. And the May Sunday light came through the big windows and lay across the floor in long, warm rectangles. I've been thinking about something, Nathan said. Emma wants to know if you'd come to her end-of-year school thing in June. Tell her yes. I was also going to ask. He stopped. Actually, Emma has already asked, and she asked me to relay it, so technically, this is her question. Olivia turned to look at him. What's Emma's question? He looked at her, and there was something in his face that was both the ordinary and the significant, the two coexisting in the way they did when something real was happening. She wants to know if you'd spend the summer with us, he said. She used the phrase official summer person. I'm not entirely sure what the full legal parameters of that designation are, but she's been developing the concept for several weeks. Official summer person, Olivia repeated. She's done a presentation. I've seen the rough draft. There are bullet points. Emma made bullet points. She said she learned it from watching you in board meetings. He paused. I'm not saying this is only Emma's idea. I want to be clear that I also have views on this matter. Emma is just a more persuasive opener. Olivia looked at the light on the floor. She looked at the six-legged cat drawing framed on the wall, the newer version, and at the machine on the coffee table with its flag that raised 3 inches and came back down. She thought about the second bedroom with the wall by the window and the Lego hook, and the drawings that were already starting to accumulate there with the naturalness of things that had simply found their right place. She thought about the thing she'd told Nathan in January, I'm afraid to lose this, and how that fear had not gone away but had changed shape, had become less of a warning and more of an acknowledgement, the kind of fear that lives in the same house as love because it's made of the same material. Tell Emma yes, she said, to the official summer person thing. Yeah? Yes. She looked at him. And tell her the bullet points were a good move, very professional. He laughed. She leaned her shoulder against his and felt the warm weight of it. The ordinary, specific, improbable weight of being somewhere she hadn't planned to be and finding that it fit. The morning light moved across the floor as the sun changed angle. A pigeon landed on the windowsill outside and left. The city made its usual Sunday sounds, muffled and unhurried, the sound of a place not demanding anything of you. She sat in it without bracing for what came next. She had spent 8 years arranging her life around the prevention of further damage, which was an understandable response to damage. And also, she'd come to understand, a way of ensuring that nothing much could reach you. Not the bad things, but not the real things either. Safety and emptiness had turned out to be closer neighbors than she'd known when she moved in. She was not fully healed. She was not going to wake up one morning and find the last 8 years reclassified as something other than what they were. There would still be mornings when the old weight came back in the particular pre-dawn way it did, and there would still be moments when something triggered the old vigilance, and she had to remind herself, gently and firmly, that the threat it was calibrated for had been addressed. Her mother was at the beginning of something slow and uncertain, and Claire was trying, and those relationships would take the time they took. Margaret Chin would remain in her contacts because the world was not done being complicated. She was 30 years old and had a job she was genuinely good at, and a lawyer on speed dial, and a 6-year-old who had given her a wall and a bracelet, and a flag that rose 3 inches and came back down. She had an apartment with sage green walls and morning light, and a photograph in a drawer face up, and a man beside her on a Sunday who had walked into a room 8 months ago and looked at her like she was worth the trouble. She had looked back. That was the thing. In the end, the thing she wanted to remember as the thing that mattered most. Not that someone had seen her, because being seen could happen by accident, through no act of your own. The thing that mattered was that she had looked back, that she had made the choice again and again, in small decisions and large ones, to remain present rather than disappear. To be a person in her own story rather than a shadow at the edge of someone else's. She had been the woman nobody noticed, and she had been the woman who chose not to be noticed. And now she was working on being the woman who had decided that her own presence in the world was not a risk to be managed, but a life to be lived. It was not a clean transformation with a defined before and after. It was incremental and imperfect and ongoing, the way real things were. And some days she was better at it than others. And some days the old patterns came back with the persistence of muscle memory, and she had to choose again. She kept choosing. Emma came back from the birthday party at 3 in the afternoon with cake on her shirt and a very detailed account of everything that had happened, which she delivered in the hallway while taking off her shoes, hitting the main points before she was even through the door. She had opinions about the cake flavor, the games, the specific social dynamics of a 7-year-old's birthday gathering, and whether the party favor bags had been equitably distributed. Were they? Olivia asked. No, Emma said, with the certainty of someone who had counted. Marcus got an extra sticker sheet. Was he aware of this? He was very aware. How did that resolve? Emma considered. He gave me one. We're even. Good negotiation. Emma nodded, satisfied. She dropped her shoes by the door, walked into the living room, looked at the machine on the coffee table, adjusted something small on the gear mechanism, turned the handle, and watched the flag go up and come down. Still works, she said. Still works, Olivia agreed. Emma sat on the floor in front of the machine, pulled her knees up, and looked at it with the focused consideration of someone who was already designing the next version in her head. The May light came through the windows. Nathan was in the kitchen making sounds that suggested dinner was being contemplated. The apartment had its warm, inhabited energy, the specific quality of a space where people were doing the ordinary work of being present in their own lives. Olivia sat on the floor beside Emma. "What's it going to do?" she asked. "When you figure that part out." Emma thought about it seriously, the way she thought about everything. "Something useful," she said. "I don't know what yet, but something that helps." Olivia looked at the machine, the flag, the moving parts that worked together. "That's a good goal," she said. "I know," said Emma. Outside, the Chicago May continued being warm and unlikely, and the city held its ordinary Sunday self around them, and the afternoon moved forward the way afternoons did. Without drama, without announcement, just the quiet accumulation of time in a life that had, finally, room enough in it for all the things worth keeping.